Chapter 47:18. Jian Wushuang looked at it for another 4 weeks before he finally settled in. From the past of the Divine Force universe, he became an immortal from the ancestor level. However, with the strength of his Yenxian realm, during the several years after he entered Dianhuan, he did not meet the time of life and death. Even Juhai Tianzhong and the whirling ancestors of Wu Tian did not give him a real fear of life and death. Jian Wushuang vaguely guessed that it would be the watershed to really take that step out of the realm of Yenxian. Not long after sitting in Dingwu, he seemed to realize something again, and reached out and walked out of the arms without the word. Turning over the first 15 pages of the book, full of small prints, Jian Wushuang's gaze stayed on page 16, but there was nothing but blank. Shouldn't it? I was talking about Chun Qing with the sword just now. Why is there nothing in this book? With a somewhat skeptical attitude, Jian Wushuang tried to transfer the battle memory in the consciousness out of a ray. The wisp of consciousness soon sank into the pages of the book. Without disappointing Jian Wushuang, this consciousness of cloud smoke began to be written directly, and the regular small prints appeared on the blank pages. And this time the writing speed is extremely fast, almost tens of breaths, and I have all finished writing. The number of pages has changed from the original number of pages to a thin one. No, Qing's Kendo, there are so few places to write. Jian Wushuang was a little unbelievable, quickly looked through it, and after confirming that there was really only one page, some could not laugh or cry. But then a more mysterious scene appeared, that Chen Qingjiando, which was originally only one page, disappeared line by line. It's like there is a pair of big hands in the midst, which is erasing. No, what's this operation? Jian Wushuang secretly wondered, wouldn't this Jianji despise Qing's Kendo, so it was erased again? Without an answer, Jian Wushuang could only watch Qing's Kendo and disappeared completely. It's a really weird sword collection. He looked at the lone book in his hand and at the same time thought that if he meets a guy like Ding Bai in the future, wouldn't he be able to print it and steal the teacher? Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. This sword set is simply the ultimate treasure. The predecessor who created this sword set is probably an interesting guy. After personally collecting the sword set, Jian Wushuang took the seat. For 5 years, for him, it was not even as long as the fishing in the Yunshao Palace. He strives to adjust the dynamism and state to the peak state in these 5 years in order to deal with everything that happens next. The Boyang bottle was also opened, and the 3 emperors just returned to the bottle and fell asleep after wandering around in a small orphan day. Everything was spent in gentleness. Jian Wushuang did not know what was waiting for him next, and was forced to accept it. Undercurrents often seem to be calm. Undercurrents surge. 5 years but flashed away. When Jian Wushuang's hairs rushed out again, the Xuanhe streamer transformed from Yan Li reemerges, and Xiao Gudian's enchantment is opened. The little emperor who had disappeared from his extravagant clothes was replaced with a kimono symbolizing the emperor on this dark golden monastery. Each stroke of the needle threading depicts mountains, rivers, and lakes, symbolizing the meaning of Bona. And on its collar, 2 dark-eared, symmetrical, thin-eared animals were inlaid with dark gold thread. This kimono made the little emperor lose a little bit of the charm of boys and girls, and a little more hero and martial arts, but the pale paleness on his face could not be concealed. Behind him stood nearly 1,000 figures. Little emperor, I'm going to invite Brother Sword to come. Chun Qinggong shouted, and then suddenly stopped when he set off. You are waiting here, I can just go there. After leaving this sentence, Xiaodigen went to the depths of Xiaogyushan alone. A little envy appeared in Qing's eyes. Brother Sword is really awesome. I haven't seen one person with this treatment for so many years. The thin purple robe slightly raised his gaze, looked at Xiao Daijin's distant figure, and dropped his eyelids again. Seemingly, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting in Wu, slowly opened his eyes and saw a figure coming. Brother Jian, Gongzi Yan came to visit. Xiao Dijuan smiled and stopped on the square. Spit out a muddled breath. Jian Wushuang stood up and nodded. It is considered to have seen. Looking up and down at the swordsmanship, the little emperor said with interest, "How is the recovery?" "Not bad. When will you leave?" "Already. Just waiting for you." Jian Wushuang nodded, and Chuanqiu also walked out of the palace and stood behind him. When he was about to leave, Xiao suddenly stopped him, then stretched out his hand and stuffed a set of clothing to Jian Wushuang. "Put it on." The group of embroidered ladies in Desiyu tailored it. "It's not bad." Jian Wushuang was quite helpless and was not easy to attack, so he had to rush into the palace and change his clothes. A moment later, the sword that changed into a long suit with silver silk embroidery thread on its front appeared. Although he was extraordinary and handsome in the clothes, it made him feel uncomfortable, which was far less comfortable than the black shirt ranger. Little Emperor's eyes showed satisfaction, and then turned to open the way. "Brother Jian, I don't see it. You are not much worse than the Emperor." Chuanqiu looked up and down at Jian Wushuang, and envy flashed in his eyes. "Don't talk nonsense. This dress doesn't suit me very well." Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly, quietly loosened his belt, and then stepped forward. Chuanqiu scratched his head. "It's really a bit like my emperor's figure. It's really strange." He would never have thought that this young man beside him, who was silent and quiet but seemed to have an inexhaustible story, was once a cosmic god. A total of more than 1,000 ancestor-level top repairers, 20 Yenxian condensed in the void at this moment. The real fangs that he has been hiding have been revealed to Jian Wushuang. Outside of the Six Heavens realm, in the emptiness of Desiyu, the little emperor's rare and calm gaze slowly swept over the figure standing in front of him. And at this moment, the entire big Siyu's void began to scream. A monster that Zun Wushuang had never seen stepped on the moving clouds and came by the wind. Such strange beasts, such as dragons like sheep with curved corners and thin ears, are engraved on the body with golden scales, and they are quite mysterious while they can't tell the weirdness. A total of 20 strange beasts and 10 imperial garrisons reach. On top of each imperial dragon, there is a banner engraved with yen characters. For a long time, the little emperor's calm, but full of prestigious voice resounded throughout the entire division. "Everyone with the son of Yen, go to heaven and go to the banquet." Chapter 47:19. No one spoke, all stood. Each of them has followed the little emperor's side since his indefinite years, without having to say a word to know its meaning. The intention to kill is skyrocketing. The thin purple robe walked out of the array, holding the palm of the little emperor, and sent him into one of the 10 imperial courts. The remaining 9 vehicles are suspect cars that serve as a deceptive role. After sending the little emperor into the imperial court, the thin purple robe turned back and looked at Jian Wushuangdo. "And follow me." Jian Wushuang had no doubt about him, and after looking at each other with Chuanqiu Qinqing and others, he went straight to Yuyong. After being pushed into the chariot by the thin purple robe, Jian Wushuang only saw that Xiao Dijuan was also among them. He was embarrassed and had to quit. "Brother Jian, let me stay here." "I let my partner let you in here." Xiao beckoned. "I'm not sure if there is any danger on this journey, so I'm going to let you go." Jian Wushuang nodded, and then sat in this luxurious chariot. Chuanqiu and Qinqing, and the rest of the Yenxian all entered the other 9 imperial palaces. The remaining more than 1,000 ancestors did not follow up together, but kept up with more than 100 to act as ceremonies, and the rest were scattered throughout the entire division. With the preparation of the personnel, A total of 10 imperial dragons rose by the wind. The monsters like dragons and sheep stepped on the clouds, and every step was 100 million miles away. Although the speed is so terrible, sitting in the imperial wing is a little bit bumpy. At this moment, this is enough to accommodate dozens of people in the imperial court, only sitting Jian Wushuang and Zhao. The atmosphere was awkward, and Jian Wushuang simply closed his eyes and pondered. With the clouds of smoke rising from the golden furnace, the entire Yulong has also become an excellent place for spiritual practice. Brother Jian, it will take a few months to go. If nothing happens, just take a rest and rest. Xiao Dijuan reminded. Jian Wushuang nodded. Yes. At this point, this long distance has entered a silent stage. The imperial princes who walked through the void passed through the void world and marched towards the most mysterious place. The 6 emperor realms of the Little Emperor are just the 6 general universes in the big domain. And beyond the scope of the big domain, the world is even more vast. The heavenly court, known as Emperor Wuyang, could not be reached. Jian Wushuang was really curious about this legendary figure who basically lived in the verbal abuse of the 3 emperors. What kind of horrible existence should be able to destroy the emperor bodies of the 3 emperors and the heavenly court with one's own strength? And the Emperor Fenghua, emperor of the spring and autumn period, also fell into the hands of Zhen Wuyang. And there are only 4 people who know the sword Wushuang alone. Perhaps this kind of emperor should know something. Jian Wushuang secretly thought about the next step in his heart, and unconsciously, it had been almost 20 days. I do not know whether it is in a dream or when he is awake. He feels a surging crisis. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes violently, and Xiao Dijuan opened his eyes at the same time. Is this group of grotesques crazy and dare to kill here? Really, the seat is muddy. The little emperor said coldly, even if he would step out. Jian Wushuang reached out to hold him in a timely manner and said in a deep voice, "Don't go out first, just watch its changes." He nodded slowly, and the strength of his hands quietly surfaced. At the next moment, a surging force of extreme strength broke through the void and burst directly in these 10 imperial dragons. Jian Wushuang only felt that the space around him suddenly swelled up, and then the imperial lord in front of him shattered. The 3 Yanxian, who were sitting in the Yuqi, were hit the spot. No longer able to watch its changes, Jian Wushuang rushed out of the imperial court directly and stood in the void. Chuanqiu, Chun Qing, and others quickly moved closer together. "Brother Sword, how is Zhao?" Chun Qing said with a real sword. "I'm fine." A gloomy voice sounded, and the little emperor stepped out slowly. Jian Wushuang's eyes were slightly condensed. He felt the strong breath that came from all directions, no less than 40. In the void adorned with stars, it really encloses more than 40 Yanxian. 20 to 40 is at a great disadvantage. But Chun Qing and other Yanxian still surrounded the little emperors in the first time. Immediately afterwards, a faint-faced Yanxian stepped forward and pointed to the little emperor. "Leave him behind. I can put you on a path of life. Or the offender. Die." "Who sent you? Gongzi Jiao or Gongzi Yu?" Xiao Emperor Shun Sheng asked. That Yanxian smiled again. "What is the use of the dead? To know more. But you still have a way to live, as long as you return to the same path. I promise not to hurt you alone." Little Emperor sneered. "Are you really so sure? Just eat me like that?" "Of course, as long as I think it is impossible for all of you now to leave alive." In a word, the entire void seemed to become a quagmire, and the original vast force directly rolled towards the little emperor and others. Jian Wushuang snorted, and the invisible long sword in his hand was directly cut open and surrounded, and everything returned to its original state. Seeing this scene, Yan Xian, who was still grinning, stunned, and then said, "I think you are just a group of people, but I still have some tolerance." Chen Qing heard that he immediately took a step forward and directly released the magnificent and powerful force. His realm is rising. Even Jian Wushuang feels that Chen Qing's realm seems to be far more than Yanxian. All the Yanxian who surrounded the front changed their faces. Hands on! Boom! Boom! A total of more than 40 Yanxian fully released the terror of the extreme. The void is rapidly collapsing, and the rallying power is like shooting from a train. Chen Qing stretched out his hand, and suddenly a barrier of strength surrounded the crowd, blocking the terrifying power. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitates, directly evokes the invisible sword, and moves forward. This barrier could not last long, even though Chen Qing's realm showed signs of breakthrough, but he was still Yanxian, and he could not protect himself under the siege of so many Yanxian. Therefore, Jian Wushuang took the lead to set off, killing the most immortal Yanxian in as much time as possible. 40 Yanxian were many times more in that intersection in the Jingchuan Tiancheng. The little emperor's eyes are about to bleed. This time and again, the interception is far beyond imagination, and there is no emotion left at all. "Young master, if I live, I will kill you first." Void Tremor, led by Jian Wushuang, a total of 60 Yanxian, start fighting here. With a sword forced to retreat in front of him, Jian Wushuang directly threw out a celestial gate, so as to hit all the enemies who dare to move forward. Chapter 47:20. One Yanxian was unable to retreat, was crushed into powder by the Chuanjia Tianmen on the spot, and the Xianyuan was broken. The battlefield of Jiao's fight was immediately vacated, and more than a dozen Yanxian all looked at Jian Wushuang vigilantly. That kind of Zhuangqi's magical power is so vast. On the other side, Chen Qing opened a ring of killing, and each blow was enough to hit several Yanxian who dare to run forward. But Rao is so, these Yanxian under the small emperor's seat are still showing their fatigue. How can 20 be against 40? Without the help of the three emperors, Jian Wushuang stood up to several Yanxian undefeated at the most, but now he was surrounded by no less than 10. He alone attracted a quarter of the firepower, very depressed. "Keep your head. Obediently, I can make you suffer less." A force of vigorous force hit Sword Muzu. The sword in his hand reversed, and the sword tore the offensive. The sword smiled disdainfully. "On the basis of the shameless wastes of you, can I take my head?" For the first, Yanxian's face, and then a move in both hands, a total of 11 Yanxian worked together, and the sky covered the sky like the power of the entire void. And the cover pressed. Jian Wushuang's eyes were dignified when he first raised up a force to block, and then lifted the sword straight up. Absolute sword. A sword can be regarded as 100,000 sword, with a broken face. Boom! Thousands of streamers burst into flames, and Jian Wushuang, holding a long sword, moved forward. Nagdamang was split in half from the middle and was quickly dissipating. And Jian Wushuang was also extremely uncomfortable at this moment. The combined effort of these 11 Yanxian was not what he could bear. In this, the skin surface seemed to start to burn. "Brother Jian, it'll help you." With a cry, Chuanqiu manipulated his 8 arms with anger and rushed straight ahead. The 8 giant arms rang with the sword Wushuang in the cover of the sky. Jian Wushuang only felt a slack in his body, and all his strong eyes were gone. Spring and autumn came to him. Shun Sheng said quickly, "Brother Jian, let's retreat. 40 Yanxian, we will continue to stalemate like this. We must die 10 lives." "Can't go." Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly twisted. He had his own set of life rules. If he left in this way, it would be a disaster for Chen Qing, Xiaodagen, and others. Without retreat, morale is the first thing to hit. In any case, he can't retreat today. stretching his hands to separate the huge power from the impact again. Jian Wushuang turned back and pushed Chuanxiu into the protective circle. He is just an ancestor. Even if he has 8 arms of anger, he will directly die in Yangxian's offensive if he is a little careless. The only thing Jian Wushuang can do now is to try to protect it behind him. There are constant Yanxian decay, and the power of such existence can destroy the world between hands, not to mention that there are nearly 60 Yanxian players. The void is torn, and the planes and worlds that are slightly closer are also affected and continue to collapse. Nearly 100 ancestors were killed by the town as early as the beginning, and the immortals brought by the Little Emperor were also rapidly decreasing. Several people have long been the end of a strong crossbow. Even if Chunqing has reached the peak of his strength, he is also weak in the face of so many Yanxian. A sword of Xinghe Lake and the sea emerged, reluctantly blocking the crowd of Yanxian, who through again Jian Wushuang and others had been encircled. At this point, there were only 8 Yanxian left beside Xiaodigen. Chunqing's right arm was scarred, especially on his right rib. The scars were shocking. These wounds caused by the same Yanxian are difficult to heal in a short time, which also means that the combat power will be reduced to a certain extent. Looking at Yanxian, who still has nearly 25 or 6, Jian Wushuang, and others were all sinking into their hearts. Little Emperor, after I leave, I will return to the 6-day realm and stop reaching the heavens. Chunqing whispered, only alive can we continue to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Brother Sword, the safety of the Little Emperor will please you. He looked at Jian Wushuang. The Sword Emperor hadn't even spoken yet. The Little Emperor said coldly, Chunqing, when do you need to decide this matter? Chunqing was anxious, but if you don't leave the Little Emperor, you can't go away. As a successor emperor, I have to go to the heavenly court. Even if I die on the road, I can't change it. Shao Emperor's voice was indifferent, and his eyes were dead. Oh, the successor emperor, a waste that can only be cultivated but can't be enlightened, dare to call the successor emperor. The first one was a soft-looking Yanxian who disdainfully sneered, and more than 20 Yanxian behind him also laughed at the moment stand up. Master, just give it to me. The thin purple robe lowered his head slightly and was taken by the Little Emperor while taking a step. Just let the waste in his mouth send him on the road. His voice was indifferent, but he swept up with a deep dignity. The next moment, fight again. A field filled with dark colors sprang up, and the Little Emperor was in it, as if to become the emperor who truly controlled the party. Destroy the Master Yan, reward. Instead of being afraid, the soft-looking Yanxian didn't be afraid, but instead smiled with a ghostly figure and rushed directly to the Little Emperor. One sword pierced one of Yangxian's peepa bones. Jian Wushuang sank with a sigh, and Qi Tianyan's force slammed forward. Taiman's terrible power of terror came again. However, all the terrifying Yanxian who had already been taught all stopped together, and under the full blow of Jian Wushuang, there was no casualties. Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, but he immediately raised his invisible sword and rushed forward. Various supernatural powers blasted on him. Even the indelible body began to be injured. The Little Emperor released the realm, and with one blow, he destroyed a Yanxian, but then was blocked by the rest of Yanxian. Chunqing and others also managed to protect themselves. A shocking wound began to appear on everyone just as this fierce battle was about to be completely besieged by Jian Wushuang and others from the boundless void. There was a sudden burst of sky. Jian Wushuang almost subconsciously grabbed the Little Emperor in front of him, then slammed back. Zhang! A horror that easily breaks the void cuts through the sky, as if the sky and the sky are open Hundreds of thousands of miles of the void are splitting the void like a deep prison under this blow. Almost at the same time of retreating, that I don't know where it came from, but with a direct cut of destruction, he came to crush the sky. There are more than a dozen Yensian who have no time to dodge, and immediately the figure becomes powder, and the fairy source turns into nothingness. This dreadful and terrifying sword directly plowed the void into a gullies of nothingness. Dead silence, the extreme dead silence. All the surviving Yensian froze at this moment. Chapter 47:21. With a sword of hundreds of millions of miles, the power of Huang Huang poured out. It is impossible for anyone other than Yensian to be able to cause damage to either side of the world in this great Yanhuan. Even Jian Wushuang, when destroying Jingchuan in the beginning, could only use the power of the three emperors to destroy it. This shows the difficulty. What kind of existence is this sword capable of extinguishing hundreds of millions of voids? A bunch of guys who don't know the sky and the ground. Do you know, to protect the environment? A very impatient voice resounded in the void. Jian Wushuang gazed at the source of the sound and saw a hazy figure standing far away. Even if it was so far away, he could feel the pressure of a transcendental cognition. However, this figure glowing dimly only appeared for a moment, and then disappeared directly. This is just a warning. If you dare to destroy anything and treat everything as nothing, then all will disappear. The sound of prestige rang through the void, and it took a long time to disappear. Such a terrible sword, such a mysterious figure, were just shocked and eventually disappeared. Looking at this sword mark that ripped through the void of hundreds of millions of miles, all Yensian twitched at the corners of their mouths, which was too domineering. This sword of indiscriminate attack directly beheaded nearly 20 Yensian. If it wasn't for the sword Wushuang's great attack, he would hold back the little emperor and retreat. Recovering from the shock, looking at the dozen or so Yensian left in front of him, Jian Wushuang's mouth sneered a sneer. It was originally a one-sided suppression situation. Under the sword of the mysterious man, it was directly reversed. With the addition of Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan still has 6 Yensian ancestor level left, and only 12 Yensian left. He and Chunqing alone can hardly resist the 12 Yensian, not to mention the help of Zioadigen and the thin purple robe. The Yinru Yensian, who had no heart to fight anymore, shouted for a quick retreat after trembling, and he fled regardless of his preparation. A very dark vine, as if growing from nothingness, quietly clinging to him with a rich death. The void around him seemed to stagnate, and even the strength of the body was stiff. The great terror between life and death made this feminine Yensian horrified. "Come on, save me." But the rest of the Yensian who fled in vain, no one looked at him, all scattered in the void, disappeared. What awaits him is an extremely horrifying god of extreme horror. Yin Ro Yensian turned back hard and couldn't even speak. "Open your mouth and stick your tongue out." The little emperor looked somber, holding a real sword. He heard the words bored in his heart and rejoiced. His tongue was cut, and it can grow up to thousands of years. At least one life can be left. Immediately, this Yin Ro Yensian sticks out her tongue, confusingly said, "More, thank you, little emperor." The blade was cut across, and a tongue was cut off directly. He groaned. The blood spewed in his mouth. Before he closed his mouth, another sword directly pierced his face, and the terrifying diffusivity emerged from the blade of the sword, and the whole head and the fairy source were crushed. Jian Wushuang stepped back half a step, frowning slightly. This little emperor's heart is too heavy, so it can be seen. Without the head and the immortal source of immortality, the fairy fell silently into the void of the void. Throughout the void, only a few fragments of Yensian's remained floating silently. When the real sword entered the sheath, The little emperor slowly turned around, raised his eyebrows, and glanced at Jian Wushuang. Then he passed out directly. The thin purple robe seemed to have been expected, hugged the little emperor, and ran straight to the unbroken imperial dragon. Chun Qing smiled bitterly. The old problem has been committed again. Without any meaningless questioning, Jian Wushuang rushed to the other imperial princes with Chuanxiu. In this fierce battle, there were only 3 barely usable 10 of the 10 imperial battleships, but they were small ear-like beasts like dragons and sheep with few casualties. Chun Qing was lagging behind after waving his gloves, and then left to move on. Halfway through the interception, there were only 6 people left, which is not terrible. If the mysterious man didn't cross his hand, I'm afraid that today would be another 9-death situation. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled. How did he live to the present under the interception of layers? Only Yetchen was traveling when Yuyong moved forward, sitting with Jian Wushuang. I said, Brother Jian, is there any hidden illness in Gongziyan? Did you see it just now? This is the second time. Chuanxiu whispered. Jian Wushuang thought for a moment, and then said, do not rule out this possibility. According to these 3 and 5 interceptions, it is already a miracle to survive. Chuanxiu heard the words and held his forehead with his hands. I really can't believe it. I, who wanted to put him to death, stood on the same line with him at the moment. Jian Wushuang smiled. When the time is right, let's not leave too late. It can only be like this. Chuanxiu nodded helplessly, and then whispered, however, we know that he has a dark disease, and it's easy to deal with. If one day he really wants to tear his face, he can also be hit hard. He shook his head and stopped talking. There was only a faint roar of wind blowing in his ears. It was a journey of more than 20 days in a row, and there was no accident in the following journey. The void that appears nothingness around is gradually being replaced by the sky filled with vast power on one side. It is so rich that it becomes solid, and the breath of life is in the void. Colorful shadows span across the heavens and set up on this side of the heaven. Walking through this place makes people feel dreamy and relaxed. Waving his hand to open the curtain in front of the window, after seeing this scene, Rao Shijian Wushuang all sighed. The Ninefang super-celestial realm is in the form of a portal setting off the center of the more vast heavenly court like the Arch of the Stars. Next, the unspeakable grand mystery. Brother Jian, this should be the heaven of the real Wuyang. Chuanxiu looked solemn. Immediately afterwards, there was an uneasy restlessness in the Bottle-yang bottle. The stopper of the bottle was gently opened, and the voice of the 3 emperors rang loudly. What happened to Xiaoyu? How do I feel something is wrong here? Why is this breath so familiar? It makes me inexplicably irritable. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and whispered, 3 seniors, we should now enter the real court of Zhenmiang. What? Xiaoyu, do you want to go straight to Zhenmiang Lao? The true shadow of this emperor hasn't been restored. Chapter 47:22. Jian Wushuang is full of black lines, looking at the magnificent posture of the heavenly court. I am afraid that he really must have the intention to straighten the real Wuyang Lao nest. I am afraid that he is also weak. Don't think about it. You misunderstood. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly, and then said the whole thing in and out, and said it roughly. In the end, there was silence in the bowl of yang bottle, and then there was a burst of uncontrollable excitement. Great! Xiaoyu, you continue to maintain relationship with that little Emperor Laozi and gain trust. When the 3 emperors recover, we will come and destroy the den of the real Wuyang Lao directly. No, not very good. Jian Wushuang's mouth twitched. You don't have too much psychological pressure. Xiaoyu, just act as usual, brush some sense of existence, and leave the rest to us. It really saves the time and effort of Tianda. This old Wuyang man can't think of it anyway. We are by his side. Hush! Mute. We must not expose our breath next. Everything will be decided by our friends. Little friend, you take care of yourself next. Less than a last resort. Of course, do not call us out as a last resort. We are good at recuperating. Jian Wushuang still wanted to talk, and the stopper of the bottle-yang bottle was closed directly, giving no chance at all. He smiled bitterly. At this moment, Chen Qing's voice rang from outside Yulong. Brother Sword, we should get off. Jian Wushuang responded, and then took out Qiu with Chuanqiu. Stepping on this vast cloud, Chen Qing took the lead and smirked. Brother Sword, how do you feel? Looking around, Jian Wushuang nodded. It's pretty good. Along with their conversation, a statue of Zun riding a fairy crane, or a sword, or riding a chariot, gathered in front of this heavenly gate. From a broad perspective, all of them are, without exception, in the vast clouds of Yun, countless colorful lotus peaks and rainbows intersect each other, and the 9 vast expanse to the center of the boundless heaven span, a supreme avenue paved by Yu Yun. Almost 100 figures have gathered outside the Tianmen. Under the guidance of the thin purple robe, the little emperor wearing a blood-stained dynasty dress slowly paced down the imperial court. More than 100 Yen-Xian, who were also waiting here, after seeing this somewhat embarrassed little emperor, looked at each other one by one, and then they all reluctantly bowed their hands. See the little emperor. Without looking at the perfunctory Yen-Xian, Xiadaijin's footsteps moved towards Jian Wushuang slightly. Brother Jian, follow me along. Jian Wushuang nodded and looked around again, then stood behind the little emperor. There were only 6 Yen-Xian left, and 1 ancestor followed him. Even the ceremonies were gone. Looking at Shao Emperor's slightly embarrassed figure, the hundreds of Yen-Xian are all meaningful and different. The gatekeepers were guarded by dozens of Yen-Xian dressed in silver helmets. When the first 2 Yangxians' axe and fork crossed, they stepped forward and arched the hand. I have seen the little emperor. The emperor has a command. The time has not arrived. It must not. The speech was not finished yet. The brave little emperor suddenly raised his leg without warning and directly flew the 2 Yen-Xian kicks out. Get away from me, Xiadaijin said sullenly, and then strode into the heavenly gate. No one dared to stop him. The 2 Yen-Xian who had been kicked were gray-faced, standing awkwardly. Jian Wushuang waved the axe and the scattered axe to the 2, and then paced to follow the little emperor and stepped on the supreme avenue together. And the figure waiting outside the Tianmen began to whisper. One of the elders with crane hair and eyebrows, holding a whisk, snorted, increasingly flying. In my opinion, after this banquet, the position of the little emperor should be the prince. Fuzhou is not afraid that the wind will flash his tongue. If you say this to the ears of the little emperor, it is estimated that the heaven will not be able to be beaten with 2 swords. One of the middle-aged men, with extraordinary charm, seemed not to deal with this elder with a long hair and responded with a sneer. The elder named Fu Jie's face changed slightly. It seemed that he thought back to something, stopped talking, and closed his eyes to meditate. At this moment, another Yushur gathered in front of this heavenly gate. On top of these imperial dragons, they are marked with different fonts. Before the first 10 imperial guards, the correct flag was hunting in the wind. Immediately afterwards, a figure dressed in a plain white kimono stepped out of the imperial court. A group of Yen-Xian who stood on their own saw this, and hurriedly stepped forward and arched their hands. I have seen Gongzi. The young man dressed in a Zhou dynasty dress, a rich and handsome young man, saw the imperial guard with the flag of Yen parked aside, his brows flickering slightly, and then he looked at the Yen-Xian who came to greet and smiled slightly. The Xian family, with the correction of the sun, went to heaven. Promise. a group of Yenxian promised, with a smile on his face. As the suns stepped into the heavens, dozens of imperial dragons came together again. In front of these imperial dragons, all have their own words. Yu, Qian, Mo, Hua, Lin. Not all. Wearing a kimono and slowly getting off the car, their faces are different, and after a smile, they step into the heaven with their respective companions. Walking in this supreme avenue, Jian Wushuang felt that the diffractive force in his body was renewed and transformed at a speed that he could feel. At the same time, the voice of the supreme prestige, like Hongzhong de Lu, resounded throughout this heaven. The heavenly court opens. All fairy families, please sit down one after another. Jian Wushuang looked up to see the front of the sample. At the front of the supreme avenue was the magnificent heaven. Since the Emperor Xiao woke up, his complexion was somber, and his anger was more condensed as if it were substance. It seems that this time he went not to a banquet, but to fight. On the way here after the interception, the clothes of Jian Wushuang and others were somewhat damaged and blood-stained, and they looked full of anger. Walking forward without knowing the geometry of time, when the heavenly courtyard where the thousands of waterfalls fell appeared in front of everyone, a hongqiao from the heavenly courtyard connected to the heaven, magnificent and magnificent. There are more than 100 people who lead the boys to come to hongqiao, with red lips and white teeth. No one would think that these boys are extremely powerful. Ami has seen Xiaodigen. At first, a little girl flew straight into Xiaodigen's arms and grinned. At this point, the hostility of the little emperor's body had converged. Little Ami, have you been lazy in spiritual practice in these years when I was away? His face was rare, and he eased a lot, holding the little girl and walking slowly. The little girl tilted her head and said a little embarrassedly, Ami, it's a bit lazy. After all, the practice is very boring. You see, I have lost a lot of hair for this. Chapter 47:23. The little emperor stretched his hand and scraped the bridge of the little girl's nose, and then stretched his hand towards the thin purple robe behind him. If you eat too much sweets, you may lose your teeth. The thin purple robe murmured, and then took out a handful of colorful sugar from her arms. The little emperor took out 2 of them, one into the little girl's mouth, and one into his own mouth. The little girl smirked in the arms of the little emperor with her arms folded. Ami is not afraid of losing her teeth. Don't lie to you, my companion. They all say that I will not lose my teeth. The thin purple robe didn't talk much, but distributed the candy in hand to the rest of the leading boys in turn. Containing sweets, the little girl's big flashing eyes looked at Jian Wushuang curiously. Somehow, seeing the little girl's red lips and white teeth, Jian Wushuang inexplicably remembered the naive and the old brothers in the divine universe. Little Emperor, who is this big brother? Xiao Dijuan turned around and looked at Jian Wushuang, then smiled. He is my good friend. You have to call him Brother Jian. Brother Jian. The little girl smiled sweetly at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang reported with a smile, subconsciously reached out and touched the small bun on her head. Little Emperor patted her lightly. Go play, I'm going to meet the Emperor. The little girl nodded and said, Little Emperor, don't make Emperor angry this time. He was so angry after you went back last time. The little Emperor did not speak and reached out and carried it on the hongqiao. After leaving the boy, his anger was quietly rising again, and his face was somber, and he was just like to set foot on hongqiao and walk into Tianmen in one step. There are also more than 10 Yenxian guarding the Tianmen. The 2 leading Yenxian, who were wearing gold armor, hurriedly and consciously gave way after seeing the deity, almost throwing the axe in their hands to the ground. The little emperor stepped directly into it, and Jian Wushuang and others followed. Buzz. Flowing clouds and water ripples spread between the world. Feeling the warm and lush flowing around the body, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. Between the entrances, countless towering mountains are entrenched here, and thousands of jade-like waterfalls are embedded in them, converging into huge rivers. And in the very center of this heavenly court, a vast expanse of sapphire giant hall is located in Yuyuan, a round of a big day that exudes warmth and brilliance, reflecting behind it. Here, is it the heaven? Jian Wushuang looked at the magnificent momentum in front of him, and his heart moved. In front of the sapphire giant hall, a road paved by Ruanyu has been paved to Tianmen. The little emperor first stepped on the Ruanyu Avenue and walked toward the front. After sighing in his heart, Jian Wushuang and others followed, feeling the overflowing huamang. Several people did not speak again and went straight to heaven. As he was about to step into the heavenly court, the ground covered by Ruanyu was condensed into two robes by the flowing clouds. Have seen the little emperor? The two Dao almost gave birth to a figure and said to the little emperor, "Go away." Xiao Adijin blurted out the words directly, using yen force to shock the two, and stepped into the giant hall. The two twins had the same figure. It seemed to have been strange, and after being kind to the crowd, they reverted to drifting clouds. Walking into this sapphire giant hall and stepping into the vast square, Jian Wushuang only saw this, and hundreds of elders had already gathered at this time. Every old man is surrounded by a layer of warm and lush mansions, and it is difficult to observe its realm, but what is certain is that for every old man gathered here, realm practice is never under Qinqing. Looking at the little emperor, who was full of anger, the more than 100 old men all greeted, "I have seen the little emperor." Faced with these old men, the little emperor's face eased a little, but he just said, "Go in." After that, Bento went straight to the hall. A look of helplessness appeared on the faces of the elders. This time the banquet was afraid that it would be difficult to end. Enter the hall of this majestic view, and on the side of the throne on the other side, the little emperor sat coldly. Immediately afterwards, a group of elders waiting in the square entered the giant hall in turn. No one spoke, all hands crossed in the sleeves. The old was watching the nose and the nose. As a bit of yen xian entered, the atmosphere in this vast hall was slightly subtle. Surrounded by the yen xian, a young man dressed in white teeth and plain clothes, a rich and handsome young man, stepped into the hall. Face to face, Xiao Daijin's complexion grew more cloudy. Instead, the young man took the lead to break the silence and said with a faint smile, "The second brother, the younger brother, has seen Big Brother." Jian Wushuang looked at him with a deep gaze, and there was a playful color in his eyes. It seems that the heart is feeling that the young man in the white suit looks subconsciously at Jian Wushuang, with some scrutiny in his eyes. At this moment, the little emperor walked slowly down from the position of the head of the throne with a glorious glory. He stepped back slowly, his face unnatural. "Say, are you sent by you?" The little emperor's voice was cold, and his eyes filled with anger. The young man corrected the corner of his mouth, unconsciously. "Big brother, what are you talking about? Why can't I hear?" Before he finished talking, a powerful slap was drawn directly on the son's face, followed by another powerful kick, kicking it far away. Such a combination of skills is too fast. After a while, after the flashes of afterimages, all the immortals reacted, and the two had already flew out of the hall. "Brother Sword, let's go to watch a good show together," Chun Qing said, excitedly, directly pulling Jian Wushuang to the outside of the palace. I saw that on the corridor. The little emperor straddled on the son's body, stretched out his two slaps, and swooped with bows on both sides. The son's face also swelled at a rate visible to the naked eye. "Little emperor, don't want to fight again." "Emperor will come later." One of the old men with black hair and black beard had no choice but to dare to step forward. For a time, there were many voices of admonishment, but the little emperor seemed to not hear it, and he still slapped his palm and opened his bow. Yongziyen, you're enough. The prince, knocked down to the ground, violently exclaimed. Just as he was about to try to resist, Chun Qing smirked and released Yanli to firmly fix his arms. Chun Qing, you want to be arrogant, fight between the emperors. Why do you intervene? Yan Xian, who was full of voice, scolded. Chun Qing glanced at him, and then disdainfully, Lao Tzu gets involved. Do you have the ability to beat Lao Tzu? Are you arrogant? An old man with a bite. Have you practiced on the dog? A Yan Xian, who was next to the son, snarled with anger. Chun Qing's face suddenly sighed, his eyes like a sword shot at him. Yan Xian, who wanted to scold again, immediately swallowed her throat and shrank back. Chapter 47:24. For a time, there was only the anger that the son was unwilling, and the slap of the little emperor's bow. Nearly 200 old men in the heavenly court looked at this scene and shook their heads and sighed. This is not the first time about the emperor's flying and arrogance. It was a total of 5 feasts and 3 fights. However, although the emperor was very cryptic about this, he never stopped it and even had no crimes or lessons. This also caused the participants to dare to speak out, fearing that the little emperor would be upset and give himself a sword for nothing. With Chun Qing as an accomplice, the little emperor let go of his hands and feet and slapped his face, and the son could only bear humiliation. As for the more than 10 Yan Xian brought by him, although his eyes moved, he did not dare to dissuade him. At this moment, a sigh of resounding sound. Gongxian, Mo wants to use this heaven as your 6-day realm. Is your heaven the place where you want to be? The same figure in a plain ceremonial dress stepped into this sapphire giant hall, which was quite a martial art among the eyebrows of the martial arts. The little emperor raised his head slowly when he heard the words and looked at him with yawning eyes, and then let go of the young man under him and walked slowly towards him. What are you going to do? The rather heroic young man stepped back half a step unconsciously, his eyes showing vigilance. It was a powerful slap in response to him. The Yingwu young man seemed to have expected that his neck would escape the blow a little, but then there was a sudden pain in his abdomen. I saw that Shao Emperor, with an incredible speed, directly hit the top of his knee and hit his lower abdomen, forcing him to lose his resistance instantly. And at the same time the slap of the storm threw up, the young man stood up, covered his slightly bluish cheeks, looked angrily at the little emperor, who was still violent, and then raised the palm of his raging rage. Second son, you have already done many secret attacks. This time, let's pause. Chun Qing sounded with a little sneer, and at the same time, a more prudent force was blocked in front of the son. The son corrected his gaze and looked at Chun Qing's gaze with a sudden death. Chun Qing, what do you mean? It's not interesting. People are doing it. The sky is watching. Oh, I almost forgot. You two are already heaven. Chun Qing said with his arms behind his head. The killing in his eyes became heavier and heavier, but the prince just snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves, and retreated to the side, closing his eyes and raising his mind. Brother Jian. Chun Qing immediately leaned against Jian Wushuang. His face mysteriously said, Guess who is Emperor Shao? Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Is it his brother again? Chun Qing nodded. The third brother, Gongziyu? He smiled dumbly. Would he want to draw several brothers one by one? I'm not sure, Chun Qing shrugged. But it is estimated that when the 4th is drawn, the emperor is coming. This brave young man named Gongziyu, with a slap in the face of the little emperor's storm, snarled hard with dozens of slaps, and slammed into his face with his vigorous palm. But the space seemed to stagnate for a moment, and the little emperor slightly passed his head slightly, and then stepped back, and kicked the son off with a kick. There was an uproar, and the companion brought by Gongzi, you could not help but take a step forward and whispered, "You are a prince. Why are you the second son? And the three sons are embarrassed in this heavenly court. Are you arrogant?" Little Emperor glanced at him coldly, and in his hand quietly appeared a real sword with immortal air. Seeing that, the companion wearing a purple robe stepped back and gritted his teeth, saying, "Heaven cannot be stained with blood." At this moment, there were 4 other bodies dressed in tooth-white suits, all walking into the Sapphire Giant Hall. But after seeing this scene, the 4 figures took a half step back in tacit understanding and looked at the little emperor alertly. "Come here." Little Emperor withdrew the real sword and waved at several people. One of the slightly younger people responded quietly, "Brother, don't come unharmed." The atmosphere was heavy, and all Yenxian stared at this impending battle square. The little emperor sneered, and a soft sword was wiped from his waist without traces on his palms. The face of the 5 people changed slightly, and one of the thin young men stepped forward. "Brother, stop. Don't make the emperor unhappy anymore." He turned a deaf ear and raised his sword step by step, revealing his murderous intentions from his eyes. At this time, Chun Qing's complexion also changed subtly. "Brother Sword, Xiao Dijuan seems to have really killed himself this time, so I will step forward and stop." Jian Wushuang nodded. "This magnificent heavenly court, if it was really stained with blood, I am afraid that the emperor who has not yet appeared will never forgive the little emperor." The young man covering his cheek aside with a happy face, the look in his eyes. I wish they could fight on the spot. A total of 5 magnificent powers filled the square in this Sapphire Giant Hall for a moment. Every son in a kimono is ready for a battle. The little emperor didn't seem to worry at all. He carried the soft sword in his hand and moved forward as if he had entered the unmanned state. Just as Jian Wushuang and Qin Qing were about to step forward to stop the sky that was originally lingering in the clouds, I do not know when there will be a brilliant Chinese rhyme. At this moment, the entire cloud-filled sky dome changed. Jian Wushuang seemed to realize what he was looking at. I saw a black robe formed by a gathering and scattered cloud. He stepped on the colorful rhythm and walked down the sky, shockingly, as if there were rules of the avenue flowing around him. "Is this the true young emperor?" Jian Wushuang murmured in his heart, somewhat shocked by his general trend. With a palm of your hand, the battle between the little emperor and others was directly suppressed, and the strength was dissipated. Even Jian Wushuang clearly felt that the strength of the body was suppressed. The black robe has its foot in the center of the square. It looks like a sculpture. The faces of the 5 people all changed, and then they shook hands at the same time. "Have seen you, Bo." Little Emperor did not speak, reached out and placed the soft sword around his waist, then said quietly, "Yubo." The black robe fluttered slightly, a pair of turbid eyes slowly swept around, and finally looked at him. "Little Emperor, don't be angry anymore. The Emperor will arrive later." As the voice fell, it was another voice that seemed to permeate through the ages, carrying the supreme majesty, resounding, "Are you kissing?" All Yenxian who gathered in the heavenly court heard this voice, and they all sang their hands and said, "I have seen the emperor." The heavenly dome, with dim, colorful colors, dimmed sideways, and a majestic figure dressed in the costume of the emperor of the mountain and river emerged. Behind him, there are 99 figures. Chapter 47:25. Every body shape is full of magnificence, and the light wheels of different colors condensed by Yenli shine on the entire heaven. It made the majestic figure in the emperor's clothes look a little sad. But any Yenxian who can come to this heavenly court is by no means so stupid. The dignified figure capable of ascending to the throne and destroying dozens of emperors by his own power is hundreds of millions of times more terrifying than he revealed. Looking at the mighty emperor who stepped on the sky, Jian Wushuang finally saw the true face. For a time, In the vast square of this giant palace, the atmosphere was extremely tense. The question with anger is obviously from the emperor's mouth. The little emperor looked up at the emperor Wei standing at the top of the cloud and said quietly, "Go back to the emperor, and the sun will not dare." "Then what were you doing just now? Do you want to stay in the heavens?" Another question was issued with a question. Immediately afterwards, the Emperor Zhenliang came to Haohan Square with endless momentum. "They are all your siblings. As a prince, not only did you not lead by example, but you have lost your identity again and again. Why should I dare not deal with you?" Little Emperor did not say a word, and there was no fear in his lowered eyelids. At that moment, the figure of Yuba's black robe slowly came to Emperor Zhenwuyang and whispered, "Emperor and Little Emperor have not made a big mistake. It is not unforgivable. After the banquet, dispose again." The body of Wei glanced at the Little Emperor. "And then to you, Bo." There was helpless flashes in his eyes. "Well, let's have a feast first." At the end of the speech, he took the lead into the main hall and then followed 99 old men carrying all kinds of huamang, followed with a smile. "Good." Hundreds of Yenxian promised in unison. The sun stared at Qin and others fiercely, and then strode into the main hall. This farce finally ended with the presence of Emperor Zhenliang. Xiaodigen gave them a deep look, and then came to Jian Wuxuang and others. He seemed tired, grinning reluctantly. "Come on, the feast is about to begin." "Little Emperor, did you hurt anything?" Qin was worried. He shook his head, then stepped into the hall under the guidance of a thin purple robe. Inside the main hall, the Emperor Zhenliang sat on the throne. On his side, the gloomy Little Emperor sat on the side of the head. Yubo is like a black sculpture standing behind the emperor. In the vast hall, the elders who carried the wheels of various colors sat side by side, and sat down on the sides, slightly down the first position, is the sons in white kimonos. Under the instruction of Xiaodigen, Jian Wuxuang, and the others sat down with the 6 sons, but they were clearly distinguished, sitting in the misty clouds. Jian Wuxuang looked at his nose with his eyes and his nose, but he didn't care about the scrutiny cast by the boys on the opposite side. Immediately afterwards, Chuanqiu, who was sitting next to him, lowered his voice and said, "Brother Jian, I really didn't expect that one day I could come to the heaven of Zhenliang. Don't do anything stupid." Jian Wuxuang looked at him and smiled slightly. Chuanqiu nodded. "Relax, I know how important it is." In the low-pitched conversation from time to time, a fairy came from the cloud and presented a plate of precious fruits. Shen Wuyang sat on the throne, looked at this heavenly court with a smile, and then gave a more exaggerated emotion. From this emotion, Jian Wuxuang also knew about this heavenly feast, and it has only been 5 times since its first opening, held every other Chinese New Year. Jian Wuxuang doesn't know exactly how long this year will be. According to preliminary estimates, it is likely that the time of the 10 galaxies will be broken. Time has long been the most meaningless thing here. After the achievement of Yenxian, Shou Yuan is endless, except for the destruction of external forces. Even the so-called Mingming Heavenly Tao may have little effect on Yenxian. After all, the creation of the avenue of heaven and earth, the ultimate order, is likely to come from the hand of a certain fairy. Those old men who have carried various rounds of light and have reached a level so high that even Chunqing feels dazed, is to help Shen Wuyang to open up the heavens. The first veteran who boarded the emperor won the trust of Shen Wuyang. Even if it is the seat of the 6 sons, not as good as them. It is an honor to be able to enter the heavenly court for the banquet, so even a humble immortal at the moment is in the heaven domain controlled by Shen Wuyang and belongs to the existence of the top. As the table in front of him was gradually filled with precious fruits, a beautiful fairy was also overwhelming. Chunqing, who was sitting on the side of Jian Wuxuang, had a pair of bright eyes attached to the fairy from beginning to end without leaving. Guangxianzi, it's me. I don't remember me? Chunqing, who controls Jingchuan. Last time we were still talking in the Fengtai. Looking at the fairy, who was leaning over and pouring wine, Chunqing's eyes widened and talked. The fairy pouted. I don't remember. It doesn't matter if you remember. When the banquet is over, I'm still listening to the wind tower. How are you? Chunqing grinned. The fairy smiled and returned without the answer, holding the jade pot. There is a play. Chunqing whispered, excited. Hearing the whole course of Jian Wushuang, he smiled slightly, picked up the glass of wine, and tasted it in a sip. As these fairies retreated, nearly 30 fairies came to the cloud, dancing in the center of the temple, and the sleeves transformed into a beautiful water sleeve. Brother Sword, I think your age should be small, but there is a sweetheart. If not, brother, let me match you up. Chunqing leaned up with a glass of wine and smiled faintly. Farewell, you still have to worry about your own problems first. I already have a person in my heart, and I will never forget it. Jian Wushuang replied, his voice firm. Chunqing heard the words and nodded his head. The sword brother's heart is firm. No wonder that such a mindset can reach Lin Yanxian. No answer. Looking at the fairy with long sleeves and good dancing in front of him and the slightly noisy sound around him, Jian Wushuang actually sat down. Chunqing couldn't help crying and laughing. After Jian Wushuang and He Chunqiu had a drink, he began to appreciate the dancing posture. Zhen Wuyang was sitting on the emperor's seat and looked at the little emperor sitting next to him from time to time. He seemed to want to say something to ease some atmosphere, but the little emperor seemed to feel nothing at all, just drinking one glass after another. In the end, Zhen Wuyang couldn't hold back, leaning forward and whispering, Yenner, how have you been all these years? Back to the emperor, it was not bad. The little emperor said calmly, and then he disappeared. 6 days there is too far away. After this banquet, you come to live with me. Zhen Wuyang asked him again. Chapter 47:26. Little emperor's mouth twitched with a chuckle. It's goodbye. I'm in the 6-day realm, and some Yanxian would be tempted to die earlier. If I follow him next to the emperor, I'm afraid it's even more uneven. Zhen Wuyang heard the words, frowned, and then glanced into the palace with eyes full of oppressive authority, and finally stopped intentionally or unintentionally in front of the next 6 sons. Yenner, can there be evidence? Evidence? It's almost dead. Little emperor said, holding a jade pot and drinking directly at the spout. Looking at the little emperor sitting so frivolously in the side capital, a glimmer of haze flashed in the eyes of Prince Gong, but then he covered up again. He couldn't understand that, except for Gongziyan, the other 6 sons are more suitable for being a prince. But why did the emperor choose such a waste that could not be practiced as a prince? A lot of supreme resources. He piled up from a waist to Yanxian every drop of blood in his son's Yen meridian. Almost all are the most top-level resources in heaven. Since the emperor did not want to do it, he would do it on his behalf and die a waste, which is far more than 10,000 times better than the entire big CU accompanied him to decline. At that time, even the emperor will consider him. A fierce sneer was unconsciously hung on the face, but the eyes cast by the little emperor struck him in the face. The son was stunned, and he quickly put away his expression and used drinking as a demonstration. The little emperor withdrew his disdainful gaze, and then unconsciously looked at the only guy who was somewhat maverick. In this heavenly, immortal fairy dance, this guy actually dived down to close his eyes and sit down, really a unique one. It's such a strange guy. Don't you have any fun at all? Thinking of this, the little emperor squeezed a bit of diffusive force and shot it on Chunqing's body. Chunqing understood that when he touched the sword Wushuang with his elbow. Brother Sword, wake up quickly. Chun, please invite you to see something good. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and looked helplessly at Chun Qing. Chun Qing smiled in a low voice, then opened his mouth to the fairy who was close at hand and exhaled. Yanli turned into a strange wind, rising from the ground without any signs, actually blowing up the skirts of those fairies. For a time, the beautiful scenery lit up. What? The screams rang out from the mouths of the fairies, and they were already in a mess, each hurriedly covering their skirts blown up by the strange wind. Seeing this situation, Jian Wushuang was speechless, and then shook his head. "Brother Chen, it's better to make less jokes." Chun Qing scratched his head and didn't wait to speak again. Then the young master who had noticed it suddenly slammed the case and angered, "Chun Qing, you are arrogant." There was silence in the heavenly court. After finishing this sentence, the son immediately confronted the emperor Zhenwiang and said, "Return to the emperor. Chun Qing blatantly wrecked the heavenly court and has no way to look. Punish." "It's not me. I don't have it. Everyone didn't see the demon wind from where. Why did you think it was me? It was clearly framed." Chun Qing got up and said angrily. Zhen Wuyang shook his head helplessly, then waved his hand. "Chun Qing, get out without my summoning. You will not be allowed to go back to heaven again." "Promise." Chun Qing was frustrated and promised, but when he turned around, he raised his eyebrows and glanced at young master. After this episode, the fairies who were forced to reveal the spring under their skirts jumped off again. All ran out of heaven. For a time, the first half of the banquet was over. Next, it was Zhen Wuyang's extremely exaggerated emotion. Since he could not sit down again, Jian Wushuang simply took a closer look at each of the Yanxian powers present. The elders with all kinds of light wheels, that is, the veterans who had fought with the Emperor Zhen Wuyang, were the first echelon. They had an almost profound, extreme strength, and a state that could not see the real even Chun Qing had out of reach. Jian Wushuang can vaguely guess that they may have taken that step completely and reached another unknown and mysterious state. As for the second echelon, a group of Yanxian who are headed by Chun Qing are the peak of Yanxian, but they have never been able to break through. The sword Wushuang is in the middle of the second and third echelons. After all, ordinary Yanxian, even 4 or 5 Yanxian, can't effectively kill him. Even with Chun Qing, Jian Wushuang has the confidence to withdraw even if he loses. What will it be above the peak of Yanxian? Lord Zun, how could he exist? And what role does the master play? No one can give him the answer. Everything can only be approached step by step. As the Emperor Zhenwiang's emotions came to an end, a message came into each Yanxian's ear, with Yanli. "Driving the peach." Jian Wushuang murmured softly, and then looked at Zhen Wuyang Emperor, somewhat puzzled. A jadeite fairy peach, enveloped by thousands of Chinese, rhymes appeared in the emperor's hands. "You are still the same as before. This peach contains a great opportunity, which is the most indispensable part of breaking through Yanxian. If you win it, it will be of great benefit." At the moment, all Yanxian's faces showed an unstoppable joy. The most pinnacle of the feast, Duo Tao, finally began. Those who are able to participate in this feast are not only the most powerful Yanxian strongmen in this heaven, but ordinary treasures are already as difficult as their state of mind. Only by breaking through that arrogant state can they be attracted. This peach contains a great opportunity to break through. Once obtained, it is basically a foot out of the realm of immortality. But there is only one Xiantao, and the participants have more than 300 Yanxian, and the competition will be extremely fierce. And there is a high probability that these Yanxian, who are the runners, are still eager to try. After all, even if they fail, the emperor will also give a very generous reward. The popular peach has always been the 6 sons of the Emperor Zhenwiang, and only the son of Zhenwu won 2 fairy peach. This time, he also had a winning ticket. As for the little emperor, he has never participated in the battle to win the peach. Xiantao landed on the ground, limited to 1 year, and found and held 10 days, the ultimate winner. Zhen Wuyang said the rules between the palms overturned, the fruit of the rhythm of the Didao road through the Tianting Palace, fall into the entire heaven and earth. Gentlemen, please start. Emperor Zhenmiang said, with a smile. Due to the rules, all Yanxian except the elders can participate, but the 6 sons can only bring 1 Yanxian into the market at most. The younger son took the lead to ask for help. Behind him stood a white-robed Yanxian, who took care of his companion since childhood, as the son asked for his life. Gongzi Yu, Gongzi Qian, and others also participated in the battle to win the peach. Chapter 47:27. The 6 sons were all dispatched. Although each of them had a warm smile on their faces, they were already undercurrent. This is the best time to perform, directly related to their status in the hearts of the Emperor Zhenmiang and the elders. In these several battles to win the peach, the prince has already become the existence of arrogant people. Even those elders have already favored it, and it has the meaning of substituting for the little emperor. Therefore, every son-in-law has made great efforts to bring his realm to the top. After all, he can only get more attention when he comes to the end. Just as all Yanxian was ready to go to heaven, a lightly written voice sounded in the heavenly court. Emperor, I will participate in this battle for the peach. Zhen Wuyang wrapped all Yanxian in this heavenly court for a moment, and then all looked at him. The little emperor slowly got up and swept the Yanxian. Yan, are you sure? Zhen Wuyang also got up, a little happy in his eyes. I've never participated in it all the time, so that some people have ignored the existence. This time, I just want them to distinguish between the primary and the secondary. The little emperor's voice was low and prestigious, and he looked at the next one without scruples. Zhong Yanxian. The 6 sons looked at each other in unison, and their faces were completely different. The son did not speak, but the palms in his sleeves were tightly held together. Well, Yenner, I haven't seen your cultivation behavior for a long time. I can take advantage of this opportunity today. Zhen Wuyang smiled and waved his sleeve at the same time. Come here, informed Qin Qing to I rolled in and asked him to accompany Yenner. No, Emperor, I don't need Qin Qing this time, Xiao Dijuan said here, looking at Jian Wushuang. His eyes met. He said, Brother Jian, can you follow me? All Yanxian's eyes converged on Jian Wushuang's body again. Zhen Wuyang also looked at Jian Wushuang, the emperor's consciousness beyond his imagination, and he could easily see everything he wanted to know. Soon, he was a little puzzled. This kid who was just a fairyland, in addition to his amazing talents, seemed to have a unique physique. Even he couldn't see through it. At the same time, he has a feeling that he can't tell why. Although this young man's fairyland is not very deep, it seems inexplicably extremely comfortable, as if there is a certain level of association. Taking back the emperor's consciousness, Zhen Wuyang nodded, Go on, Yenner. For this grand dude, who always dislikes the mountains and dews, and is silent once the matter is determined, even the emperor is difficult to change. Suddenly, Xiaodigen came to Jian Wushuang and said slightly, Let's go. It seems they shouldn't be able to wait. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate too much. After nodding, he got up and walked outside the heavenly court. The thin purple robe suddenly grabbed Jian Wushuang's arm, and a pair of muddy eyes seemed to want to explain something, and finally only whispered, Little Emperor has given it to you. Xiaodigen stepped forward and patted the shoulder of thin purple robe, then walked out of heaven with Jian Wushuang. Luyan Shuwan, Yenli Vast, standing outside the court of heaven, all Yanxian scattered down like a panic, and the 6 sons also brought their own companions and fell to heaven. The battle for the peach that involved more than 300 Yenxian in total began. The Emperor Zhenwiang, who was sitting in the heavenly court, waved his hand, and the misty scroll made by Yanli was reflected in the hall. The scene in this picture is Huang Heavenly Realm. You guys, guess who will win the peach this time? Who will it be? Zhen Wuyang asked. It's the second son, a long-bearded old man. Fu Su smiled. Another old man in black robe refuted, the 4 sons are not weak. The 3 sons are the last candidates who can win Xiantao. If the old man is right, he already has a preliminary understanding of the fairy style. Hundreds of elders in the heavenly courts expressed their opinions, but in general, they pointed the candidates to the second son, the third son, and the 4 sons. Zhen Wuyang seems to have other answers. Looking down at the sculpture like, Yu Bodeo, Yu Cheng, what do you think? Uncle Yu raised his head, and his murky, deep eyes seemed to pass through the flowing clouds, looking towards the heaven. The little guy next to Xiaodaijin is extraordinary, so you also think he will win this fairy peach. The little emperor is calm and will not do things that are not sure. Once he shoots, everything will be a foregone conclusion. After listening to you boss words, Zhen Wuyang no longer spoke. With the elders, he carefully watched the picture together. Between the vast clouds, the 2 black-shirt rangers dressed in figures sat in the clouds, seemingly not in a hurry to compete for Xiantao, but they seemed to be traveling. This heaven, which carries the entire heaven, is completely composed of the giant water of Gaochuan, which is quite mysterious and vast. You said, how much assurance can we get to the end? On the empty flowing cloud, Xiaodi Junxing feared that Jian Wushuang could not hear it and shouted. Jian Wushuang heard and said, I don't know, I try my best. So what if my brothers come over again? It's not easy, kill it back, but I think in this heavenly court, they should also be able to converge a little bit. At most, it's just a little action. No matter what, I will win Xiantao this time. There must be no mistake. So confident, I can feel that your siblings are very resentful to you. Maybe they will come together next time. Why afraid? Xiao Dijuan asked with raised eyebrows. Of course, I'm afraid that I'm drawn in for no reason, but I want to live for a few more years. Jian Wushuang lay back in the clouds and laid back. Little Emperor pouted, which can become Yenxian, which one does not regard Shouyuan as nothing? You old monster, who doesn't know how many years have lived? Are you so attached to longevity? Jian Wushuang felt very helpless. It has not been 10 million years since he entered the path of spiritual practice. Now he is actually called an old monster, and he adds some old-fashionedness. Moreover, he couldn't explain it. He was involved too much, and it was extremely likely to cause unnecessary troubles because of the missed words. I am afraid that the Yenxian in Dayanhuan, can hardly imagine a Yenxian who is only a few million years old. After arrogantly passing by, under the tug of the little emperor, the 2 fell into heaven. In the huge, roaring water, the 2 figures drove the waves forward. Yenxian, who participated in the battle for the peach, passed by, glancing at them, and hurried away. Until the last moment of fighting for Xiantao, every Yenxian was unwilling to confront the son of the emperor Zhenwiang. Chapter 47:28. After all, with the exception of the little emperor whose strength was not announced, the remaining 6 sons all had the terrifying fighting power of tying the 3 Yenxian with one battle. In addition, each son can also carry an old companion with a deep realm and can basically erase directly when facing the individual Yenxian. Of course, erasure is not a direct kill, but a teleportation. In this battle for Peach, basically only the sons are fighting for it. Rao is so, the Yenxian who can attend the feast of the heavenly court are still rushing towards this. Although Xiantao is impossible to obtain, there are countless great chances in the heaven of this heaven. If you can get even a hint of fairy feeling somewhere, it will be a big transformation. Therefore, apart from a few suns, most of those who participated in the peach robbing rushed to the supremacy, the giant rivers and rivers, standing forever, with grass and mayflies, accumulate in the sun and the moon. Every grass, tree, mountain, and water in this heaven has already had aura of vitality and shuttled among them. The sublimation of the body is sublimating at a subtle speed. At the same time, there are also fairy spirits built by the way of heaven, which are very unfriendly to these interrupters. Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan were very unlucky. When performing a reed crossing the river in a giant water, the unknown underwater fairy set off a huge wave and directly lifted the two into the water. Fortunately, the fairy at the bottom of the water is not malicious, but after a little bit of play, it disappears. Damn, it's really unpredictable. Jian Wushuang, who was embarrassed to the shore, fell back on the shore. After the last big voyage, he had some resistance to the water, fearing that he would meet the giant sea sky chapter again in the water, that kind of unknown and scary creature. Little Emperor's performance was not much better than Jian Wushuang's, and he was slightly gasping and helpless. Since the waterway is not easy to go, let's take the mountain road next. It seems that 1 year is enough, but in this vast sky, it is not enough. Jian Wushuang analyzed, and at the same time looked at the Shiryet Songlin. The little emperor nodded. According to you. However, just as the two were preparing for the route, a fairy resembling a giant ape, but with a dragon head, quietly protruded a huge head from the green forest in front of it. The turbid breath from the black, hole-like nostrils is much stronger than the hurricane. Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan glanced at each other, and both saw bitterness in the other's eyes. Boom! A palm defeated a Yensian figure, and at this moment the sun's eyebrows were full of gloom. Behind him, I do not know when dozens of Yensian gathered. After a moment, the sun corrected his voice in a low voice. You check in batches one by one, try to avoid the big conflict with the Yensian next to the sun, but try not to cause a big conflict. The dozens of Yensian promised at the same time, and then scattered across the sky in a flash. Ma'am, do you think that the one who won the Xiantao this time will be the son of Yenzi? A strange smile appeared on Baipao Yangxian's face. The second son laughed. Do you think that there is no strength at all, or can the sick emperor have a climate? The son corrected his eyebrows and twisted it into a Chuan character, and said in a deep voice, My partner, pay attention to your words and deeds. You have a sick tuberculosis. You rot me into the stomach. Otherwise it will be passed into my emperor's ear. I must also be implicated. Follow the second son. Baipao Yensian bowed his head to admit that he was wrong. This, on the other hand, is by no means your opponent. Young Master Zhang didn't open his mouth. His brows spread slowly. Yeah, if it's not the Emperor's protection, this shameful guy should die before he is born. The real blood and luck of the Emperor, no matter from the level of life or the perception of the road, are far beyond the top level of the same realm, and even this advantage has become more apparent after entering the realm of Yensian. But there is a special case among their 7 sons. This special case is the son of Yen. As the eldest son of an emperor, his physique has been declining to the extreme since he was born, almost died, and accompanied by various tuberculosis. It is impossible to practice at all. This is a shame, as the bloodline of the emperor who controlled the avenue and waved to create the heavenly court, he would actually suffer from such an incredible illness. He couldn't figure it out. How could the Emperor Beizhuang have a bloodline suffering from tuberculosis? Even any blind treasure in the heaven realm could not be healed, as if it were some kind of curse accompanying him until his death. The little emperor suffering from tuberculosis has also become a forbidden emperor, Zhenwiang. No one knows except their 6 sons and their companions. How can a guy who vomits blood violently after strenuous exercise deserve to fight him? There was a sense of pleasure in the eyes of Gongzi Deng, and he secretly said, "Since I haven't stopped you from coming to heaven, then this time, in the face of the emperor and their face, you will step on your sauls." What is the location of Xiantao now? Return to the second sun. There is a special fluctuation in the direction of Jiaozhou, and the 4 suns and the 5 suns are likely to be there. Go to Jiaozhou, and at the same time release the news. Let Yin Xian along the way try to get rid of Gongzi Yin. Expensive. A loud roar rang through the wild forest, and the ancient giant tree began to collapse. I saw a huge to the extreme strange ape running in this green forest. The sturdy body easily broke the giant tree in front of them. If you look closely, on the back of this strange ape's vast silver hair, the 2 dressed rangers appear to be lying on their backs contentedly. Jian Wushuang beat a full hiccup and then gave a thumbs up to the little emperor. Just now, a big hill-like fish entered the strange belly of both of them. What Jian Wushuang didn't think of was that this man who was a prince and had a gloomy face all day long, like someone who owed him 800 yuan, was actually a good fish roast. Just a piece of rock salt, a pile of towering green forest. It simply roasted the beautiful grilled fish. For food, Jian Wushuang has long gone. The reason for the roasted fish is purely when fighting with the apes under the seat. A fish immortal with a wise mind floats up from the bottom of the water, and coincidentally, the sword is a double-inch swordmang, sent it to the west heavens impartially. Adhering to the principle of not wasting, Jian Wushuang reluctantly took it out of the water and prepared to sacrifice to the 5 organs temple. The little emperor took over and baked a delicious grilled fish. Eating my grilled fish will help me when Xiantao. Xiao Dijuan raised his eyebrows to look at Jian Wushuang with a satisfied face. Chapter 47:29. Jian Wushuang was helpless and patted the broad back of his body. Can I say no? Most of this has entered this guy's stomach. No, you can't eat less than this guy, and you should work hard when you win the peach. Xiao Dijuan looked serious. Cannibalism is short. Jian Wushuang said leisurely, agreeing. Then 2 people and 1 beast continued to walk leisurely in the sky. At this moment, among the heavenly courts, all the veterans who were originally watching the pictures of the heavenly realm were all weird, and even the real Wu Yang on the throne was twitching the corner of his mouth. Originally an extremely tense battle for the peach. When the picture changed, when he arrived at the 2 of them, it turned into a survival path for food exploration. Heavenly Emperor, S. Heavenly Tree. So I was given this boy S order. There is some blood in Zhen Wuyang S heart, and all the sky trees are all the top raw materials for the creation of heaven. And there is no heaven without the Emperor S luck, and they CANT grow at all. And the sky trees growing in the heavenly realm can be regarded as a fish roasted by the little emperor and burned cleanly with a fire. However, when he saw that Xiao Daijin's face was no longer sullen, Zhenwuyang Emperor suppressed the complaint and began to look at this vacation-like leisurely duo with great interest. Little Emperor, is this a broken pot? In the heavenly court, an elder could not help but whisper, "I'm not sure. I look like the little emperor. It seems that I don't intend to compete for Xiantao." In the opinion of the old man, it is a wise move for the little emperor to show his demeanor as a brother, and let his brother be modest. If you talk more, you will be punished in this seat to go to heaven realm to take care of Tian Chumu. Heaven is still. Sitting on the back of the strange ape, Jian Wushuang looked at the chain iron plate on the neck of the strange ape, looking a little weird. "What is your chain iron plate? Even Yanxian can be imprisoned." The little emperor nodded. "Yes, unless all steps can be taken in full. Otherwise, all Yanxian can escape my control." Jian Wushuang heard the words and felt awkward for a while, thinking that if it was not the reason for the imprisoned chain, How could he possibly be a prisoner for several days? Seemingly seeing where his heart was, the little emperor said again, "This is a treasure in my emperor's hand, named Tiansu. When I took over the six-heaven realm, the emperor paid me. And at the beginning, it's not me who traps you, it's the little ones who do NT open their eyes." Jian Wushuang didn't pay much attention to the original things. After all, he only became a prisoner in less than a day, and he directly wiped out a Yenxian and did not suffer a big loss. It just made him a little curious as to where he was caught. Before the sword Wushuang opened his mouth to prepare for an inquiry, an indescribable life and death crisis burst out of his consciousness. He didn't want to think about it. He released his strength directly and slapped the giant ape's big head. Strange ape heart grasps the understanding. The huge body suddenly a face break and then lie prone on the ground. A total of more than 10 magnificent and powerful forces swept from all directions, almost wiped the heads of Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan. The gigantic giant forest cut off a large area, and the power of terror exploded. Standing in the air, Jian Wushuang and Xiao looked cold. If I hit the head just now, I am afraid that I will be seriously injured on the spot. Immediately afterwards, 11 powerful Yenxian figures appeared, all looking at him strangely. A group of miscellaneous things. Dare to injure this seat in this heaven? Xiao Dijuan looked clouded, and his eyes were as thick as water. If he was not just Jian Wushuang, he would be hit hard even if he was not out of the game. As the first Yenxian, it was the support, not that put the Jusi outside the Tianmen at the time. At this moment, he held a floating dust, and a pair of immortals made the pie. He didn't care about Xiaodigen's insults, but instead smiled. How much Xiaodigen offends is really a last resort. I hope that Xiaodigen can voluntarily withdraw and save the next big move. The little emperor looked awkwardly. Is the sun sending you? Fujie didn't open his mouth, but flicked the dust and said softly, "Please quit this little emperor to avoid the next big move." Miscellaneous things, find death. He shouted in rage, facing the 11 Yenxian instead of flinching. He directly confronted. A slender, soft sword stirred the wind and the clouds, carrying the supreme power cover to press against the knot. Fu Jie's eyes flashed inconceivably, and then he smiled coldly, dusting the sky with his hands. "You guys do it." The dust blows up to 1,000,000 feet in the wind, and there is a lingering posture carrying away. At the same time, the other 10 Yenxian also left, and all the magnificent Yenxian bombarded the little emperor. Strive to get it out of the battle. But at the next moment, a blade of sharp sword was caught in the wind like a torn scarf and suddenly cut forward. The dust that was about to cover up the sky was directly cut into 2 pieces under this quietly rising sword, and the little emperor also broke from there. Stab a sword straight. Life and death terror surged into my heart, and the knot was almost a subconscious head, only to escape the unmatched sword. A drop of Yin Hongxian blood rolled off the slender cut between the necks and soaked the shoulder robe. Fujie recovered from the shock and looked at Xiaodigen's eyes full of hatred. "Don't keep your hands. Attack with all your strength," he shouted, and immediately manipulated the dust that had been cut off an inch in his hand, and ran away. The little emperor stood in its place without any fear, and a dark field centered on him, spreading quietly like vines to the surroundings. And the support, not blinded by hatred. Wherever he noticed the subtle changes in the air around him, he had to hit him with 5 fingers. But the surrounding air seemed to be muddy, and he felt that the release of the force in his body was slow. With the same feeling, there are other Yenxian. The time seems to be extended for a long time, but Fujie only feels that he has been gliding in the air for a long time, but has not yet landed. The emperor's incomprehensible face gradually enlarged, and at the same time a figure with a broken sword slowly emerged, and the cold eyes were almost the same. No, why are there two little emperors? What responded to him was a sword that was almost terrifying, a colorful sword. Each sword reflects colorful huamang in the air, xianhi hunging one after another, carrying infinite killing intention, all cut to the support knot. The Yenxian body burst open in an instant. Only the prosperity of a sword breaks the body of the immortal. Fujia fairy body shattered and turned into powder, and at the same time a fairy pill-sized fairy source escaped from it and fled in a panic. The little emperor gripped it from a distance, and the surrounding space rose like a big invisible hand, and directly took that fairy source back into his hand. Chapter 47:30. As if the heart was beating vigorously, Fuji's terrified voice resounded from the fairy source. Little Emperor, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I will never target you anymore. Let me go. I will voluntarily quit. The little emperor looked calm. Tell me, who asked you to kill me? Fujia, Xian Yuan seemed to be struggling for a while, and finally struggled. Yes, it is the second son. After hearing this answer, he was not surprised. There wasn't even a slight wave in his eyes. Little Emperor, this isn't heaven, you can't. Before even saying a word, the little emperor directly crushed his fairy source. In the heavenly realm, behead a Yenxian. Yenxian, who was seeing this scene all around, was shocked. They did not expect that Xiaodigen would dare to kill him. This is one of the ceremonies that the emperor once set up in the heaven realm that has heavenly court. One of them is that heavenly court cannot be stained with blood. But right now, the little emperor actually wiped out a Yenxian in this heaven. They all took a step back and panicked in their eyes. Once something starts, it is doomed to look back. When the sword with the broken sword was unparalleled, and the unscrupulous sword chopped off Yenxian, the remaining 9 Yenxian, the only remaining fighting intention in the heart, were replaced by fear. Then, all fled without flesh. But how can they easily leave? Adhering to the concept of cutting grass and eradicating roots, Jian Wushuang directly released the sword spirit of Xinghe Lake and the sea, a majestic star style, cut down. The most common one is straight, but it seems to have swept the millions of miles around the space, and with the general trend of stars, the every inch of space pointed by Jianfeng is suppressed. At the same time, countless sword-shaped condensed Tongshenmengs rose from the ground and swept up. This is an explosive sword. Even if Yenxian is under this style, he can only drink hatred. 3 Yenxian were unable to dodge, and were devoured and destroyed on the spot, and no trace of the fairy source remained. The little emperor also moves forward. Like a ghost, every time he strikes, he directly wipes out a source of immortal fairy. In this moment, 6 Yenxian have been destroyed. Their speed was so fast that the emperor sitting in the heavenly court and the elders were too late to shoot, and there were only 2 Yenxian left in the encirclement. Finally, when Jian Wushuang's blade was about to be cut, the 2 Yenxian under that blade quietly disappeared. Buzz. The space was rippling, and the 2 almost immortal Yenxian fell straight into the heavenly palace. Jian Wushuang couldn't hold back, and the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand almost flew himself out. The little emperor raised his head, and Sun Long looked at the location of the heavenly court. Yongzi Yen, do you know that you have violated the law? A voice with irrepressible anger resounded in the heavens, the voice of the emperor Zhenwiang. Yongzi Yen doesn't know which sky rule was violated. Please also express. Xiao Jun was not afraid, coldly said, Heaven cannot be stained with blood, but you are in Tianting, and you can kill Yenxian directly, and you still refuse to confess your sins. The little emperor heard the words and smiled coldly. It's good for me to kill Yenxian, but it's not the heaven, but the heaven. Where do I start breaking the rules? Heaven was dead, and at the end, a suffocating anger came from the direction of heaven, and everything was calm again. Fuck things. A palm shot towards the front of the case. The lips of Zhenliang Emperor's lips tremble slightly. All the elders didn't say a word. The scene in the world just now was all taken into view. The two's expressions are too shocking, especially the young man with the broken sword in the area of Yenxian easily kills Yenxian in the same realm, and it seems that it is not laborious. Even from their eyes, it is incredible. The emperor breathes his anger, and the little emperor will converge in the next trip. Yubo whispered consolation. Emperor Zhenliang closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. At this time, the two Yenxian who were rescued were all kneeling on the ground, terrified. Thank you, Emperor, for your kindness. Where is Qingqing? The Emperor is on. The minister is here. A middle-aged man in a green shirt hurried in from outside the hall. Throw these two guys out and never step into heaven again. Emperor Zhenliang could not doubt it with his hand on his forehead. Qingqing smiled. Get orders. Then he smiled, flying directly out of the heavenly court like a little chicken, one by one. The veterans of the institute turned their eyes to the scroll again, each with a touch of eagerness. There was no suspense in the end. There was a change, and it was broken by two guys who didn't follow the rules, and everything became interesting. Since the expansion of Tianyu to the extreme, Zhen Wuyang became the emperor, and these veterans have not fought any wars. That is, they haven't even used their strength for a long time. According to the rules, Shou Yuan day after day seems to be stirred up with a little interest. They are all looking forward and curious. In the heaven realm, more than 10 Yenxian who came to contain were solved, and Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a sigh of breath and brought the Tailuo Excalibur back into the sheath. Brother Jian, it is really powerful. Xiao Dijuan looked at him with a slight smile, and there was some blood on his pale face. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. If conditions permit, cutting the grass is the best decision to avoid uncontrollable changes in the future. The little emperor nodded his head, and he found that some of his views actually coincided with Jian Wushuang's ideas. In order to avoid a change in the following journey, as early as this battle started, Jian Wushuang had already decided not to let a Yenxian escape, and naturally the little emperor decided to obliterate Fujia. It was the beginning. He kicked towards the strange ape lying on the ground like a hill. Jian Wushuang was crying and laughing. This guy would look at the time like this. As early as the first time he started playing, he lay on the ground and pretended to die. I noticed that the crisis was lifted. This big guy hurriedly climbed up. His dragon-like head actually looked at Jian Wushuang with some flattering. Hey, I'm your master. You have to know who is pleased. Xiaodigen said dissatisfiedly. Jian Wushuang strode directly on the back of the strange ape. At this moment, a layer of colorful ripples wafted across the heavenly realm, and a towering pillar of sky-high giant pillars reached the dome. Xiantao appeared. The little emperor said softly. Jian Wushuang also noticed the colorful pillars, and the calm heart platform also fluctuated a bit. The level of dynamism is very special, but it seems to fit a certain shackles. It is a great temptation for every Yenxian, and Xiantao's present life means that more intense competition has begun. Cheesy won the peach before it officially started. Chapter 47:31. In this vast expanse of heaven, almost at the same time that the sky-high pillar was ascended, nearly 100 bodies carried the general trend and swept away from the wild and the wild. Congratulations to the 4 sons who won Xiantao. Amidst the misty mountains and rivers, a handsome young man dressed in white clothes and standing on the top of the mountain holds a fairy peach in the color of glass in his hand. Behind him stood nearly 20 powerful Yan Xian. And this handsome young man is the fourth brother of Gongzi Yan, also known as Gongzi Qian. Xian Tao exudes a faint breath without interruption. With his five senses intuition, he almost rushed to Jiaozhou, the most central part of the heaven realm, to cut the Shinshan mountain and obtain Xian Tao. A smug look rose from the bottom of his eyes, which was also the first time he got Xian Tao. In the previous battles for winning the peach, it was not him but the son who corrected the leader. But this time, I am afraid the winner has changed. Those who can win Xian Tao the first time have almost laid the ground, and even only need to hide it in the next time. Except for the premeditated containment, it would not be too easy to spend 7 days. However, Gongzi Qian did not think that he had won the victory. Each of his brothers is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Both strength and appeal are extremely strong. It's almost 20 days now. Except for the big brother who has almost no threats, I am afraid that the Yanxian who have participated in this battle for the peach will probably have split into several camps. Thinking of this, Gongzi Qian stretched out his hand to draw a breath from Xian Tao and gave it to a Yanxian beside him. Bring this breath, you will leave here, how far you go, and at the same time look for Gongzi Yan along the way, try to make him the target. The middle-aged Yanxian heart grasped the magical power and used a little magical power to transform the breath in his hand into the appearance of Xian Tao. 4 sons, rest assured, let us do the rest. Gong Ziqian nodded with satisfaction. More than 20 Yanxian behind him were divided into 2 teams. One team followed him. The other team escorted the fake Xian Tao away. Immortal Cloud is vast. He did not stay at all, carrying 12 Yanxian ready to leave. At this moment, a sense of crisis, of great terror, suddenly surged from behind. Father, what are you going to do in such a hurry? It was a little thin, with a shadowy figure in his eyes slowly coming out of the Zhonglin, and he was alone. But only such a figure appeared, but it made all Yanxian like enemy. Gong Ziqian's pupils shrank suddenly, as if he saw the most unwilling to face. In this battle for the peach, in addition to the son's correction, there are 2 people who make him most afraid. One is Gong Ziyu, and the other is the figure at the moment. There is no reason for him, and there are rumors that the 2 of them have realized their respective fairy styles. Once you realize the fairy style, even if there is only a trace, it means that you have taken that step, and only waiting for the opportunity to arrive, you can completely go to the next level. Originally thinking that at least 2 or 3 days later, they would find that they had chased one of the toughest guys without thinking for a long time. Gongzi Qian smiled stiffly. It turns out to be the 5th brother. Why, did you detect the breath of Xian Tao? Where? The solitary son, Mo, apparently did not want to speak more, reaching for his finger directly, and his voice was low. 4th brother, hand Xian Tao to me. I will let you leave, and it is better to be expelled on the spot. There was a touch of disgust in Gong Ziqian's eyes. It's up to you? Do you know how many Yanxian are stuck around you? I advise you how far you can roll, and I will save myself later. It seems that there is no negotiation. Young Master Mo spread his hand, with a sneer in his eyes. Do it. With Gongzi Qian's anger, all Yanxian all left, and the majestic Yanli turned into a dense net and turned down towards the sun's ink pocket. Mob. Taking the sun ink as the center, the dark blue crystals were suddenly refracted throughout the air, just like the ripples on the lake, and began to move regularly. At the same time, young Master Mo's palm strokes a long whip, which is 100 feet long and is formed by the condensation of dark blue crystals, and falls from the ripples. A faint burst of detachment suddenly burst into the sky. The long whip stopped, and the unimaginable potential energy was rippled and scattered. For those who approached, almost in a face, the body of the shattered, and then the white light flashed away from the heaven. Young Master Mo held this crystal long whip, and the whole body seemed to be surging with location and terrible energy. Every time the long whip was thrown, it was able to directly defeat a Yenxian. Each of them belongs to the Yenxian who exist in the top of the heaven, but they are difficult to resist even the hit of the sun. But it was tens of hours, 12 Yenxian, all under the attack of Gongzi Mo. All out. A stream of cold sweat flowed out from Gongzi Qian's temples, and it all happened so quickly that he was too late when he had the idea of escape. Gongzi Mo's companion came out of the darkness at this time and blocked his way. "Father, let Xiantao hand in. I will let you two leave." The young son, Mo, said softly. The crystalline long whip in his hand was like a dragon entrenched behind him, and the situation was magnificent. 4 sons, give it to him, leaving Qingshan without worrying about firewood. Gongzi Qian's companion whispered. He gritted his teeth without saying a word. If Xiantao was handed over, it was almost declared to be out of disguise. In the later period, the peach contenders would only be able to choose from the 3 of Gongzi Jiao, Gongzi Yu, and Gongzi Mo. After a moment, Master Z decided to grind his teeth and threw the fairy peach in his arms to Master Z. Looking at the precious light flowing in the hand, the fairy peach with the rainbow shadows, the youngster Mo smiled secretly and then put it in his arms. "Large companion, let's go." Young Master Qian didn't mean to stay at all, and his feet suddenly lifted up, but the next moment, the crystal long whip that was entrenched in the air shot up and pulled directly Gongzi Qian with his companion. Before they even made a sound, they disappeared completely. Everything seemed as if nothing had happened. The silence was at its extreme. At this broken mountaintop, only 2 figures were left at the moment. The corners of Gongzi Mo's mouth were traced with a smile, and his figure disappeared. Everything is silent again. And not far from this broken mountaintop, under a huge cliff, a strange ape was curling in between, and the 2 wheels were full of tension in their big eyes. Lying on the body of the strange ape, witnessing all of Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan, all at the moment were dignified, apparently shocked by Master Mo's fierce means. Chapter 47:32, 10 breathing time. With one's own strength, wipe out the 12 Yenxian. What kind of existence can this be so freehand? Even sword warriors, when facing dozens of Yangxians encirclement, they can only go roundabout, and it is almost impossible to do so easily. But the impossible scene actually happened. Jian Wushuang and Xiaodigen came to the place under the leadership of the strange ape only a moment after the appearance of Gongzi Mo. After wanting to take advantage of both defeats, he and his 2 fishermen took advantage of them and snatched Xiantao, but did not expect to see this shocking scene. As a result, he also had a preliminary judgment on the son Mo, who had never felt a sense of existence. Is this guy strong? It's ridiculous. Jian Wushuang looked at Xiao Dijuan, his face dignified. A little meaning flashed in the eyes of the little emperor. It seems that they have also been breaking through. When he was about to speak, there was a powerful force on the broken mountain. Immediately afterwards, the sun came to here with more than 20 Yenxian. Feeling the fluctuation of the strength in the air around him, the sun's eyebrows condensed into the word Chuan. Obviously, there was a fight here not long ago, but he came a step late. Xiantao, just in Jiaozhou, he shouldn't go far. He'll find it for me. The sun murmured, a group of Yenxian behind him. Even if the life was lead scattered to the entire Jiaozhou, Jian Wushuang and Xiaodigen rode on the head of the strange ape and hid under the cliff, ready to wait for the sun to get away, and then continue to move. But at the next moment, the frank ape, who had been honestly holding his breath, suddenly snorted. Julie directly flicked the 2 in a state of ignorance, and then fell behind him unfairly. The son, who was in deep contemplation, was suddenly taken aback, turned around, and saw the duo who didn't know when they appeared, his face blank and alert. "It's you, Gongzi Yan?" The two were also very confused and could not imagine that they would meet in this way. The little emperor quickly calmed down and looked calmly at the son. "What about me?" It seemed that he thought of something, and Gong Zizing began to examine the two of them. "Is Xiantao not in your hands? How about now? Are you qualified to take it away?" Xiao Daijin's eyes showed disdain. The son smiled coldly and smiled. "I still have some scruples in the heavenly court, but in this world we will calculate the old account and the new account together." "It's you alone." Little Emperor's eyes were lightly contemptuous and disdainful throughout. It seemed that he felt humiliation, and the son sighed and shouted, and a strong force of urgency rushed up, stirring the Songlin earthquake. At the same time, the white-robed Yanxian behind him also naturally marked the sword Wushuang. The four figures are about to start a war. The strange ape is lying on the cliff, and it seems to be preparing for a sneak attack. But in the blink of an eye, the prince's breath rose to the peak, and Sun Lung's gaze almost swallowed the entire little emperor. Just before the inevitable hands-on, a sudden voice sounded. "Hey, you are here too." Xiao and Gongzi Jiao looked at the voice at the same time. I saw a handsome young man in a white shirt, thin and young, and flew over. There was absolutely no consciousness to retreat. "What are you doing here?" The young man wared vigilantly and secretly improved his strength. The handsome young man scratched his head. "Of course I came to Xiantao. Just now my partner said that there was a vision in Jiaozhou." The son corrected. "Are you afraid of sending you out now?" Then I will go first. You continue." Jun Lang Youth grinned and hurriedly urged his partner to leave quickly. With the sudden blending of this handsome young man, this inevitable battle stopped tacitly. They all have concerns, such as the birth of Xiantao in Jiaozhou, the center of the world, and the rest of the emperor, and Yanxian are also coming gradually. If the two defeats at this moment are both injured, they will be extremely passive in the next competition. With a wave of his sleeves, the son looked at Xiao Dijuan coldly, and then turned away. The entire Jiaozhou seemed to be quiet again. "It's not too late. We have to leave to find Gongzi Mo quickly." Xiao Dijuan turned to look at Jian Wushuang. He nodded and looked around for a week. When he found no hidden ambush, he waved and picked up the strange ape, who was still lying on the edge of the cliff. "Let's expose it again, next time. Be careful to put you on the fire and bake it." After slamming the big guy's head hard, Jian Wushuang didn't have a good air. The strange ape heard the words and hurriedly shook his huge head, looking at him kindly. Regarding this strange ape, when he was rushing to Jiaozhou, the two of them were ready to put it back, but accidentally discovered that it had a keen sense of Xiantao's breath and great crisis, and naturally continued to carry this big burden. Sitting on the back of the strange ape again, the two followed the route where the Sun Mo disappeared and pursued it. "Brother, long time no see." As we traveled through the mountains and forests for a long time, one did not know where to start, and an abrupt voice resounded in my ears. Jian Wushuang's heart was fixed, and he looked subconsciously to his side. I saw the handsome young man who had left before. At this moment, he didn't know where he got out of it, and he looked at Xiao and grinned. A slender soft sword was pulled out suddenly, straight forward, and he would pierce his neck by an inch. The Jun Lang youth hurriedly retreated, giving way to a safe distance. How far away, dare to step forward and die? Xiao Dijuan glanced coldly at him, riding lightly. He smiled awkwardly. "In fact, brother, I am not malicious to you. I just want to tell you it is best not to compete with the second brother for their fairy peach. Their strength and state are only a line away from the elders. I am afraid of you." The little emperor looked at him sharply and looked at him. "If you talk more, I will cut your tongue now." Junleng, youth helpless, had to leave with his partner. As he was about to leave, he suddenly turned back and said, "Come on, brother, no matter what, I will try my best to help you when I win the peach." After saying this sentence, the figure of the handsome young man disappeared without a trace. The little emperor looked like he didn't hear and looked forward calm and abnormal. "This little brother is not bad, but also yours?" Jian Wushuang turned around and asked, "7 sons, the sun is coming." The little emperor seemed unwilling to mention the identities of the various emperors, and after expressing his identity, he remained silent. Jian Wushuang did not have much interest in knowing this. After a simple nod, he entered Wu sit on the back of this strange ape. It has been more than 1 month since the battle for the peach, and the owner of Xiantao has already known who it is. The only thing that matters now is how to wander among these powerful and perverted emperors and seize Xiantao. Chapter 47:33. Judging from the previous performances of Master ZMO, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang will not have much assurance to win. Coupled with the sun and other remaining emperors, they want to seize Xiantao from them and keep them for 7 days, which is far more difficult than imagined. By mistakenly hitting and catching a strange ape that is extremely sensitive to the breath of Xiantao, this saves the sword Wushuang 2 people a lot of time. They only need to sit on the back of the strange ape to get close to the target. In the following journey, Jian Wushuang and Xiaoadijan sent away more than 20 Yenxian outs. With the previous warning from the Emperor Zhenyang, he and the 2 had a little restraint, and they no longer focused on killing. Anyone who did not actively provoke provokers was too lazy to stop. At the same time, the young man Mo, who had Xiantao hidden, was about to step out of Jiaozhou, and a crisis of carrying the general situation came. Before seeing nearly 30 Yenxian encircled, a young man with the same heroic appearance as his son also followed. This time, it was the turn of the pupils, ink pupils, and the pupil, Yuziyu. If Jian Wushuang is here, he can surely find that this young man called Gong Ziyu is the guy who was beaten by the little emperor in the heavenly court that day. 5 brother, don't come unharmed. Young master, you pulled the corner of his mouth and said with a smile. Gongzi Mo did not answer. After taking a deep breath, he prepared to leave with his companion. Since the 5th brother is going so anxiously, leave Xiantao and go. Young master, you slowly stretched out his palm. His face changed slightly, and then he gritted his teeth. Xiantao gives you, let me go. Naturally, I can do it. Then a slap-sized package was thrown directly by the sun and chick towards the sun and feather. There was an eager flash in Gongzi Yes' eyes, and he stretched out his hand to catch the package, but then he frowned. In the same moment, Gongzi Mo suddenly burst into unmatched strength and went straight to the sky to plunder. Knowing that he was fooled, the Sun Ziyu directly crushed the parcel wrapped with stones in his hand. All for me. He far underestimated the terrible energy of more than 30 Yenxian, and also overestimated himself. It's almost 100 miles to escape, and all the retreat around the body is cut off. Countless majestic forces are connected to each other, which can be revealed. Even if he realizes the foundation of the fairy style, it will not help. Dark blue crystals began to appear in the air, and at the same time a long whip like a dragon fell in the hands of Sun Mo. He was still not ready to compromise, and was struggling with the final. Young Master Mo, is your brain kicked by a donkey? Don't forget everything we have done. Now you are going to look back at me for a fairy peach? The young man's eyes were murky, and he growled angrily. Master Mosi was unimpressed. I will give Xiantao to you, and I will definitely be out of the game. So do you think I will give it to you directly? If you want, just come and get it yourself. There was a touch of disgust in Gong Ziyu's eyes. His right hand was directly grasped in the void, and a long, sharp sword came to the fore. In the face of Gong Ziyu, Gong Zimo didn't have a half chance. By virtue of his own understanding of a trace of immortality, he can expel Gong Ziqian out of the game. It is conceivable that the male Ziyu, who has been immersed in the fairy style for a long time, will be a blow to him. Rao is so. He did not intend to give up Xiantao Arch. As long as 100 feet, the long whip like a dragon is the first to launch an offensive, enough to tear the whip blade of any situation, leaving a faint white mark in the heavens and smashing towards the male Ziyu. Without the unfavorable whip, he encountered a hard stubble for the first time. A sword mountain is the head, and the male Ziyu directly used the almost complete fairy style and attacked it. At the moment, the space around them seems to reflect a diamond-shaped, colorful Chinese mangosteen, which directly engulfed and resolved the swift and fierce offensive. At the same time, a thorny needle-like thorn emerged from each diamond-shaped huamang, with hundreds of millions of strands. This sturdy mangi came down with Jianshan's heavy cover, and easily sat off the long whip of the sun's ink, strangling his breath. Hua Mang flashed, and he disappeared with his companion, and he was out. A fairy style containing unique and hegemonic energy is used. When the ink of the sun is easily erased, the son of Yuzi is also stressed. He panted slightly, reached out to grab the fairy peach that fell to the ground, and was ready to leave without stopping for a moment. At this time, the abrupt but familiar opening speech sounded from the ears, making the heart of Gong Ziyu sink heavily. "Third brother, don't come unharmed." The younger son drifted from the dark with a bit of teasing in his eyes. Gong Ziyu looked at him. "You kept up with it earlier, right? Have you been hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity?" "Yes, I did come before you, but you are too anxious, so I will let you perform more. Now, it's time for me to harvest." The younger corrected his smile and stretched out his palm as he had done before. "Do it." How could Gong Ziyu wait for his death? And with a direct order, more than 30 yenxian moved, and directly welcomed the more than 10 yenxian brought by Gongzi. Since the beginning of the battle for Peach, the most fierce battle has begun. At the first time when the scene was chaotic, Gong Ziyu was pregnant with Xiantao, ready to escape. It's just that the next scene made his mood fall to the bottom. "Young Master Hua," "Young Master," Yu gritted his teeth. "Do you want to blend in too?" The noble figure of the prince, Hua, is called, and his brows are light. Gong Ziyu heard the words and sneered. "Yongzi Hua, even if Xiantao falls into your hands, do you think you can have it for yourself? Do you think that Gongzi will let you go?" Gongzi Hua shrugged. "I can't control that much. Now, when it's urgent, remove Xiantao from your hands and piggyback you out." With his voice falling down, there are also more than 20 yen Xian appeared, joined the battle. A veil of celestial power followed. The sun's wrist shook, and his sharp sword was directly torn. Regarding the enclosing Prince Hua, Prince Yu is not afraid. He has mastered a fairy style. In addition to the impenetrable second elder son, he can stand proudly among the 7 disciples. He is worried that once he enters the melee, his advantage will be completely lost, and it is likely that he will miss Xiantao again. Therefore, dogfight is the most unwilling situation that Gong Ziyu sees, full of too much uncertainty. In addition to the young Emperor Yanzi, who has never appeared, and the 7 younger sons, the 3 emperors have already carried out the most intense competition. After smashing a Yenxian with one palm, Gong Ziyu, no matter what else, fled the battle directly. Chapter 47-34. Huang's general situation burst out from his body, and he even squeezed a gap from the battle situation. Looking at the 2 sons, who were encircled by dozens of Yenxian, Gongha and Gonghua, Gong Ziyu smiled triumphantly. then stepped on the rock and walked away. "Wanna go?" The young man corrected his eyes in cold eyes and stretched out his hand to grasp it from a distance. And suddenly a great force twisted the air, blocking the way of the young man. Almost at the same time, the young Sunhua broke out, and the big companion around him blocked the attack of the 10-digit Yenxian and sent it out. Yanli turned into a sharp cone shape and ran straight to the back of the young man's feather to stab it. If he hits so hard, he will definitely be hit hard. But just at the moment, Gong Ziyu's figure was dimmed for a moment, and the arrow-like force passed through his back, but he didn't hurt him. Gong Ziyu looked back secretly, and then a pair of huge crystal wings were spawned from behind, flying into the sky. "Go away!" The young man drank his anger and shoved his palms suddenly, and a red figure swept across the mountain. All Yenxian only felt the darkness in front of him, and those who were at the center of this crimson drawing were hit the spot. The top of the mountain is empty, and the sun is standing at the center of the densely scrolled picture, and the strength of the whole body has been transformed into a crystal dark red. The only remaining sun, Hua, and more than a dozen Yenxian all looked at Gongzi correction with an ugly look. Watching Gongzi walking away with Xiantao, Gongzi Jiao transferred all his inner anger to Gongzi Hua's head. Seeing the undisguised murder in the eyes of the sun slowly retreated. "No, brother, you better think clearly without me." He hadn't finished his words yet, and the sun did not hesitate to cover the force of coming down, directly breaking his divine body and letting him out. At this point, in the battle for the peach, 3 emperors have been eliminated. The only remaining little emperor is still at the edge of the paddling stage, and the young man disappears out of thin air, and the one who really threatens the young man is only the young man. It is also understood that, a fairy style, the male Ziyu is about to take that step completely. He never wants to see the male Ziyu become stronger than him. Taking Xiantao is the first step in order to save unnecessary troubles. All the Yenxian of the other emperor camps were removed. Jiaozhou has a powerful terrain and is the pinnacle of the heavenly realm, but there is another giant mountain of Xianshan, which is about 100 million feet high, and the pinnacle is adjacent to the heaven. Right now, a figure carrying dark blue wings, breaking through the layers of flowing clouds transformed by the rich, vigorous force, went straight to the giant river of the fairy mountain. Now, it is the 2nd day of holding the fairy peach, and there are 5 days before the 7-day limit. The male Ziyu only needs to maintain such a high-speed soaring, and it is very likely to become the last peach taker. At that time, as long as he enters the Xianshan giant river to hide, even if the sun insists on finding himself, time is running out. Thinking of this, he smiled triumphantly. His figure accelerated to climb in the mountains. In order to avoid exposure, the Sun Ziyu went forward alone, and he didn't even bring his close companion with him. What he did was try his best to hide himself from the clouds. Feeling the warm breath from his arms, Gong Ziyu finally failed to resist the temptation and took Xiantao in his hands again. There seems to be shackles of numerology, and the most extreme force is surging and tempting. If you don't know that Xiantao has a layer of prohibition on it, I'm afraid the sun will swallow it on the spot. The more he looked, the more he coveted, and the head of Master Ziyu gradually became hot. He had been trapped in Yenxian realm for too long, and he had long forgotten his meaning. 5 days is just a flash, but the variables that can occur are too large. If you miss this time, you have to wait another year. He must never wait any longer. He can feel that the sun is correcting something quietly brewing. If he fails to ascend, he will be greeted by a storm in the future. Thinking about it, Gongzi Yes' already hesitant gaze became firmer. He looked up at the immortal mountain Shinfeng, which was nearly adjacent to the heavenly court and reached billions of feet. At the next moment, Xiantao was reinserted into his arms, and then his arms condensed vast expanse of strength. Like a long whale sucking water, The rich dynamism in the whole heaven rushed towards him. The magnificent shadows began to be reflected in each space. A power that transcended Yen Xian diffused, while the strands of black hair turned into white hair. This should not belong to the power of Gong Ziyu, but he was driven out by him. The only possibility is overdraft. His future in the overwhelming state of overdraft. But at the moment, Gong Ziyu's eyes were only crazy. Only the power beyond Yanxian can shake that fairy mountain peak. The next moment, the Sun Yu started, he looked like an ancient deity. Every step was shocking, the soles of the feet easily torn the mountains and rivers, and breathing was vigorous. Then he reached the billions of feet high, enough to adjoin the heavenly mountain fairy mountain, actually intending to pull it off. Infinite strength, destroying Shenfeng with his body. The whole celestial realm began to oscillate, and the gully gullied the earth. Tianhe rushed back and forth, countless fairy wail. A collapsing sound rumbled through the earth's center, and numerous fine cracks sprawled from the roots of the mountain. This immense mountain fairy peak actually collapsed. The Prince Yu, who was transformed into a huge treasure vase, was full of madness at this moment. With his shoulders against the belly of the mountain, he tried his best to pull out the fairy mountain. What is this kid doing? Sitting on the heavenly throne, Zhang Weiyang's eyebrows were tightened. Is it possible that there is no place for strength? The rest of the elders were shocked and puzzled to see this scene. They could not imagine why Gong Ziyu did so, and could only wait and see. It's like wrestling. The Sun Yu embraces this fairy mountain and struggles hard. The feedback from the Earth's core breaks, indicating that the interior of Xianshan is beginning to crack. www. Novel. Calm, suddenly broken. The innumerable boulders dropped and caused a series of disasters, and the Earth was hollowed out of the deep abyss. The unimaginable weight and height make Yanxian desperate enough. But so far, he was pulled off by the sun. Even Zheng Weiyang was a little surprised. He had such a terrifying power that he was able to cause serious damage to heaven. At the moment, the black hair of the sun's feathers became mottled, and everyone didn't know why he did it. Only he knew it. The prohibition on Xiantao was planted by Emperor Zhenwiang, and it is impossible for all Yanxian who entered the war to open it. However, Gong Ziyu knew that this Fangtian realm had the same root as the prohibition on Xiantao. Chapter 47:35. Since they cannot use their own power to destroy the prohibition on Xiantao, what if they use the power of the emperor to destroy the embargo imposed by the emperor? And this fairy mountain Shenfeng is the foundation of heaven created by the emperor Zhenwiang long ago. Gong Ziyu is to use the power of the emperor to destroy the ban on Xiantao. Embracing immortal mountain Shenfeng with one hand, he shook his hand and took out the fairy peach in his arms, and then threw it into the mountain root like an abyss. At that time, you only need to smash this fairy mountain peak, and you will be able to smash it. But at the same time, a strange ape croaked through the world, and I saw in the destroyed mountains and rivers that 1,000 giant apes flexibly traversed in the meantime. It fell into the hands of the strange ape. Good job. At this moment, even the shadowy little emperor couldn't help but lift his mouth. The Sun Yu surrounded by the fairy peak of Xianshan Mountain looked very real. When he saw that the strange ape had intercepted Xiantao from the air, he was furious. Beast, dare! The strange ape raised his head with an anthropomorphic grin, then twisted his huge figure and disappeared into the broken mountains and rivers. Gong Ziyu was furious, embracing the immense mountain of Xianshan Mountain, and threw it wildly at the place where the great ape was. This was a catastrophic moment, and the entire heaven and earth could not bear it, and began to collapse. Sword Wushuang, who was sitting on the back of the giant ape, looked up at the shadow that covered the sky, and suddenly pulled out the Tailuo Excalibur from his waist, and poked directly on the strange ape. The strange ape crowed in pain, and ran out with a speed that was almost extreme. millions of miles in a flash. Xianshan Shinfeng, which smashed to the sky and smashed to the ground, could not bear the great force, and broke from the mountain's belly. Gong Ziyu seemed to be completely crazy, and his palms swept out of the supreme force, all strangled in the direction of Jian Wushuang. The atmosphere of the heavens has been disturbed, and the shock wave generated by the Xianshan Shinfeng smashing the ground, even Yanxian cannot stand. Almost when the young son, Yu, was pulling the fairy mountain, the younger son hurried away, and the extremely powerful body also surrounded from the wild. However, after such an intensive offensive stopped for a while, both of them were dressed in black rangers, slowly emerged from the mountains, and climbed into the sky. Gongzi, yes, big mouth breathing. Overdrawing the realm of the future has already caused irreversible damage to him, and only Xiantao can make up for it. Return Xiantao to me soon. Mouthless breathing, Gongzi looked at Xiao Dijuan. Hate. Holding that Wamang's circulating fairy peach, Xiaodigen smiled sullenly. What? Are you qualified to fetch it now? Come to me, you waste. Gong Ziyu growled angrily, and the constant loss of the realm inside made him afraid. Upon hearing the word waste, Xiao Daijian's cold face suddenly sank, and a slender soft sword quietly condensed in his hand. At the next moment, he threw Xiantao directly to Jian Wushuang, standing alone, and moving forward. The vast swordsmanship surged into a unique sword that pierced the male plume. The Prince Yu, who is in a rage, is not afraid, and his palms are united, as if the strength of Yuan is like a prison. The collision between the two directly wiped out the sword of the little emperor. At the same time, young Master Yu already had a murderous intention in his heart, and he began to reflect the colorful intention in the sky behind him. On one side, the treasure phase that can cause the alienation of the heavens is condensed out, and then facing the little emperor, the giant palm covering the sky falls and sinks. This is a fairy style. It is a fairy style that can be controlled beyond the realm of Yanxian. In the current environment, once used, it means that the endless situation will begin. I want you to die, the humblest waste. It seems to vent all the negative evil thoughts suppressed in the bottom of my heart. Gongzi, yes, all-in-one style is rushed to be killed. As long as the little emperor can't escape, only Xian Yuan can break this road. But the little emperor stood on the spot. His eyes were calm and calm. Young Master Yan, hurry away. In the distance, Jian Wushuang's voice sounded. The little emperor slowly raised the corner of his mouth, facing the magnificent power, and raised a thin arm. I have never wanted to be any of your elder brothers, and naturally I will not perform the corresponding duties. Today, if you want to kill me, I will naturally return it in the same way. The indifferent to almost indifferent voice resounded, and there was no emotional fluctuation in his eyes from beginning to end. The long hair broke through the girdle and fluttered in the air. A breath of silence, nothingness, the mixture of black and white diffused, as in the same round without any warm big day, slowly rising. Gong Ziyu's crazy eyes were clear, revealing incredible eyes. That kind of breath is fairy style. No, it's impossible. How can this kind of guy who can't even comprehend the cultivation of spiritual practice realize the fairy style? The giant palm of the sky collided with the dead day of Hayo and white, which inspired the most terrible martyrdom. It has surpassed the power of Yanxian realm and instantly cleared all visible objects. The heavens and the earth are collapsing, the mountains and rivers are all destroyed. Ji-Day made every Yanxian cover his eyes subconsciously. Jian Wushuang was also a little shocked. He knew something about Xiaodigen himself. The little emperor seems to suffer from a certain hidden disease, whether it is the state of the realm or the state of the divine body, which can only compete with the ordinary Yanxian. But now, with his weak body, he released such a terrible form, which shocked Jian Wushuang, and at the same time, he was puzzled. Did Xiao Dijuan keep concealing the situation before? Now is his real strength. When the polar day dissipated, the two figures were still standing on the sky dome. At the moment, the son of the sun was extremely embarrassed from the undulating chest to the gray hair, which all told him that he was the end of the crossbow. Previously, Li Ba Xianshan had overdrawn his realm and released a fairy-style crazy, almost exhausting his dynamism to the extreme. It's the little emperor. Except for a look of infrared, he didn't get hurt. Looking at the little emperor who walked towards him step by step, Gong Ziyu unconsciously stepped back. I said, if you make a killing first, then I will return it in the same way. A thick and condensed murderous opportunity emerged from the eyes of the little emperor. He never understood the fear and convergence, even when facing the emperor. The sharp giant ons transformed from Yanli condensed and blocked the retreat of Gong Ziyu from all directions. Gong Ziyu's face was pale, and he saw indifference and contempt from the eyes of the little emperor. You can't kill me, I will just quit. However, the thunder came, and nearly 100 giants stab him without any hesitation. Chapter 47:36. Today's Gong Ziyu has no possibility of escaping. If this hit is hit, he will not even be able to get out of the game. Emperor, save me! Fighting the last trace of strength, Gong Ziyu's panic-stricken voice resounded throughout the heavens. Zhen Wuyang, sitting on top of the heavenly court, can't calm down. No one knows the character of Xiaodigen better than him. That is a guy who is lawless and has no fear. If he moved his heart, there was almost no room for maneuver. Just as Zhen Wuyang was about to lower the true shadow, the heavens oscillated. Each of the giant ons that blended in the horrible killing intention while stabbing at the male feather seemed to be blocked by a transparent barrier, and it was hard to score a half. At the same time, a light red raging force surged up, smashing every giant onto death. Little Emperor's face froze, and the soft sword in his hand began to tremble. With the light red coming from strength, it is the sun of correction. He stood in front of Gong Ziyu for a moment and looked at Xiao Emperor with a complicated look. Yes, it's you. For the rest of his life, Gong Ziyu even said something unfavorable. He didn't squint, and the sun stared tightly at the little emperor. Yongziyan, I do know how you realize the fairy style, but if you want to win the fairy peach by relying only on a fairy style, advise don't bother. With the sound of his words, nearly 30 Yenxian rushed from Sai and showed a trend of encirclement surrounding Xiaodigen and Jian Wushuang in the center. Yongziyan, hand over Xiantao, and now quit automatically. I will spare you a life. Young master said softly. Want Xiantao? It's up to you? Xiao Dijuan smiled disdainfully. I don't know why, whenever faced with the little emperor, the anger in the inner heart of the younger son could not be restrained. Even a sentence can make him angry. Intercepted on the spot. The son sighed with exclamation. The more than 30 yen xian immediately set off, the most extinct yen xian interlinked, facing the duo under the pressure. Sword Wushuang moved, releasing the force without reservation. At the same time, the ancestral technique, the realm of heaven, with the blessing of the Yenxian realm, the Tianmen Gate, which is the power of the ancestral art, has been completely transformed. Under the guidance of one side, the dense web condensed by the force of 30 Yenxian could not be pressed down for a while, showing a glued state. The little emperor raised the soft sword, and the sword was in full swing. Together, the two broke through the attack of Yenxian. The young man who was far away from the battle circle corrected, and there was a look of surprise in his eyes, and his gaze towards Jian Wushuang began to become vigilant. The move released by Jian Wushuang just now made the young man feel a little deterred. Fight against him. How much do you have the chance to win? He held out his finger and pointed to the sword fighting Wu Shuang, who was fighting. The white robe beside him gazed, and then dimmed again, less than 30%. Is it? Young master slowly raised his mouth. No wonder, young master. Yen didn't even bring Qin. There was a deeper, unpredictable guy around him. Son, let me go. I will bring Xiantao back. Bai Pao Yanxian asked. The young man shook his head and turned to look at the young man Yu. With a tight heart, Gongzi Yu stepped back half a step, and his eyes were alert and disturbed. Now that he is in a situation where the son wants to get him out, it is just a wave of effort. Help me do one thing. It's your reward for my life-saving grace. Gongzi said, suddenly a palm of his heart. Immediately, a light red diffusive force poured into the limbs and corpses of the male son, and the meridian that had dried him up was filled again. Gong Ziyu's condition recovered at a rate visible to the naked eye. Remember what you did to you just now. You just give it back. I'll wait for your good news. The younger patted his shoulder, and then slowly backed up with his partner. How can Gongzi you not know what kind of abacus he is playing, but if he does NT correct him, he will have fallen a long time ago. And where can he go back? Even without the reminder of the son's correction, he would revenge and return all the great horror between life and death. Returning to the pinnacle, Gongzi Yu felt the irresistible vigor in his body, and then stepped out in one step, magnifying the power of terror, as if the waves swept forward. A sword flies to a Yanxian, and Jianwu looks at the giant waves coming from the sky. At the next moment, the little emperor came to him quietly, and his back blocked the huge wave of Yanli. Boom! The undifferentiated offensive made Yan Xian, who was a little careless, directly out of the game. Jian Wushuang reacted, and waved his hand to form a barrier to protect the two. The little emperor, who had withstood most of the great waves of dynamism, turned more red, and his black shirt was mostly broken. Without him, I am afraid that it will be Jian Wushuang himself. Hold on, I will take you away. Looking at the little emperor with signs of fainting, Jian Wushuang sank in his heart, directly hugged his figure, and he was ready to escape. He had already made the worst plan in his heart, reaching for Xiantao with his palm in his arms. Don't, you must not give it. Little emperor looked up at Jian Wushuang, shaking his head slowly and firmly. Then we can see if we can rush out. Jian Wushuang said with a deep voice. The broken tarot Excalibur pointed straight in his hand. The young man Yuga came into the air with a smile. His palms were in the shape of a row of clouds, lowering his majesty. Holding the little emperor with his left arm, he lifted the Tailuo Excalibur in his right hand. Sword Wushuang took a deep breath and used the absolute sword. In such a situation, the mountains and rivers are exhausted, dying for survival. The most common sword to date has released the most terrifying power. This is a desperate sword that can only be released in desperate circumstances, and there is no upper limit. A sword can be regarded as a million swords with a broken face. The male Ziyu's full blow even only existed for a moment, and then broke like a boiling lake, all dissipated. Cough. Long ago, I knew you could stop this offensive, and I wouldn't do much. With the help of Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan reluctantly said, his body is weak. Even if he understands the fairy style, he can't change his physique. Jian Wushuang pursed her lips slightly. It can be blocked now, but it may not be blocked just now. Little Emperor's mouth slightly tilted, and then looked forward. The strength is so disparate. I'm afraid this time. I really want to lose. What if something changes? Jian Wushuang said slowly. It seems to confirm his words. In the next moment, nearly 20 magnificent rainbow shadows rose from the giant river below him, and the majestic momentum was shocking. At the forefront of these rainbow shadows, a huge, strange ape roared, and the figure of thousands of feet, left a very shocking impression on all Yanxian. Chapter 47:37. If you look closely on the broad back of this giant ape, a slightly immature and thin figure looking excitedly at what happened on the sky dome. More than 20 new faces of Yanxian, showing the trend of encirclement, wrapped Yanxian, including Gongziyu, into dumplings. The sun is coming. At this moment, Xiaodajan and Gongziyu, Gongzijiao, all shouted the same name. The Comer is the one who has had two sides before, and is the only 7 emperor who has a good impression on the little emperor. Brother, is this your horse really pulling the wind? I am the first time to take the ferry as a horse. Sitting on the back of the strange ape, the 7 emperors looked at the little emperor's eyebrow dance. Xiaodajan frowned slightly, apparently did not expect the sun to intervene at this time. Gongziyu also looked at him in consternation, and then said in a deep voice, "What are you doing here? Do you want to fight for Xiantao too?" "Third brother, don't get me wrong, I don't have much idea about that stuff." The young man scratched his head, and then raised his eyebrows. "I'm just here to help the big brother. You and the second brother have done too much." Gongziyu heard the words and sneered. "Are you looking for death? Even if you add 1, can you change the result?" "It's hard to say if you don't want to change, but don't you want to try it anyway?" Gongzi Lin said, stretching a lazy waist on the back of the strange ape. "Since you are looking for death, then I will solve you smoothly." The young man Yulanran smiled and took the lead in attacking. When the young man saw it, he shot the strange ape's head and escaped directly. Almost at the same time, Yanxian, who was in the same camp as the sun, also dispatched one after another, and the melee was together. Jian Wushuang only felt the pressure on his body suddenly lightened, and there was no sense of urgency to resist hard. Nearly 50 Yanxian battles. The different Yanli martyrs are magnificent. Jian Wushuang looked at the young Sun Yu, who was on the offensive against his son, and his eyes began to flourish. "Be careful," little emperor reminded in a low voice. He nodded, his palm lightly pressed against the handle of Tai Luo. His figure disappeared quietly like a ghost. Being full of attention, a sudden sense of crisis is about to push back the young son, and the young Ziyu is almost a subconscious head. Xyla. However, everything was still too late. The knife was 1/2 an inch, almost nearly chopping off his entire head. Gong Ziyu quickly withdrew, and at the same time released Yanli self-protection. Looking at the mysterious young man dressed in a black ranger, Gong Ziyu only felt that the wound between his neck hurt into the bone marrow. His wrist shook, and the blood on the Tai Luo Excalibur fell, and Jian Wushuang looked at him calmly. Healing the wound between the necks and necks, the madness in the eyes of the young Sun Yu disappeared, and he watched with caution. Being able to approach him unknowingly and beheading again with another sword, such terrible strength let the young Sun shudder in his heart. There is no extra cliché. Jian Wushuang directly lifted the sword and pressed it, and the broken Tai Luo Excalibur was full of momentum. With a sword cut, it was easy to break the strength of Gongziyu. He was terrified, and at the same time used all his resistance. Although the sword was broken, the swordsmanship was still there. Each sword carried a powerful force, and the forced young Sun Yu began to panic. At the same time that each sword style is sullen like water, it also opens and closes, making it difficult for the male Ziyu to use the corresponding force to cope. Although there is only one sword at a time, thousands of sword intentions are differentiated, and the more persecuted he is miserable. While Jian Wushuang is like a blacksmith, Gongziyu is an iron embryo constantly being hammered. In the process of hammering, each of his swords is becoming more condensed. Gongziyu almost suffocated. Under such a showdown, was he actually regarded as a whetstone? Disgrace flooded his mind, and he was ready to release the immortal form desperately, crushing Jian Wushuang like a bug. But soon, Gong Ziyu was horrified to find that in his current state, he could not evoke the fairy style. A powerful sword was cut down, and a shocking wound was directly plowed from the zipa bone of the Sun Ziyu. This sword almost cut him into two pieces from the middle. Gong Ziyu felt terrified. He found that the cold and death-like young man was far more terrible than he thought. If the little emperor brought him shock and confusion, then the sword of Wushuang is the representative of coldness and death. When he realized the horror of life and death, everything was too late. Without even unnecessary nonsense, Jian Wushuang held up the broken sword in his hand, as if he had sinned and tried, and finally dropped the ultimate sword. But at the next moment, the change was abrupt. A pale red scroll swept quietly, while a beam of light directly penetrated the back of Jian Wushuang. The gentle blood of sprayed the face of the young Sun Yu. Jian Wushuang's face was pale, and that sword failed to be cut in the end. Tarot Excalibur slipped from his hand and fell into the abyss. He also got rid of the force, like a fallen leaf suddenly fell from the clouds. Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan exclaimed, almost at the same time. He wanted to hold him, but a light red barrier blocked it. Gongzi walked out of the scroll and looked at him with a smile. It's really embarrassing. I had such a consequence when I missed it. I'm afraid he can't even get out of the game. Little Emperor's gaze changed from Sun Lung to anger. Young Master corrects, you must die in my hands. Really? But in order to prevent this result from appearing, I will make your big brother completely disappear before this. The sun said in a tone that only the two of them could hear. In a round without any warm big sun traversing the sky dome, the black and white mixed colors reveal the silence and nothingness. This is a fairy style that belongs to the little emperor. The sun also started to be fanatical in his eyes. The most elusive, like the abyss, he also showed his strength at this moment. It seems that the turbid and unseparated atmosphere, the unknown but extremely suppressed atmosphere, appears like a mist, although you cannot be headed in heaven, but it is also a good choice to add a lot to your weak body. It hurts. Feeling the gurgling stream flowing around him, Jian Wushuang, who had lost his consciousness, gradually became sober. At the moment, half of his body was soaked in the stream, and the black shirt on his body was mostly broken. He barely propped himself upside down and gasped slightly. The original fragmented chest was healing rapidly, and the evanescent power and vitality recovered quickly. All this is naturally due to Jian Wushuang's super-perfect life form. As he cut through the past and achieved Yenxian realm, his super-perfect life form did not disappear with the past cutoff, but became stronger and stronger after entering this great Yanhuan. Chapter 47:38, and his chaotic hegemony body has also achieved immortality. Even if the fairy source is broken, if there is a point of obsession, it is enough to resurrect. This is really terrible, involving various complex levels. But Jian Wushuang can be sure that he can achieve immortal immortality, absolutely inseparable from the super-perfect life form, if he is not of such a physique. I am afraid that the previous blow is enough to make him disappear. The fragmented chest had fully recovered in a few breaths, but the fatal pain still caused the sword to have cold sweat from the temples. He propped himself up from the ground and began to look around. This is still the plane of the celestial realm, but because of the war, the most central position of the celestial realm, the earth has become a little bit apart. A series of fine cracks like spider webs separated the rivers and mountains, and the riverbed was blocked by broken rocks. At the moment, Jian Wushuang is located in a mountain stream that was destroyed. He fell from above the sky dome and directly smashed the entire Shenfeng out of a hole, but he did not expect that there was this dark space in this Shenfeng. Everything was still in a violent martyrdom. He looked at the dark red sky dome and wanted to rush up again to help, but the divine body was still in a state of recovery, and even simple manipulation of strength was impossible. In desperation, Jian Wushuang can only wait for the divine body to recover and move along the stream under his feet. The gurgling of the stream, which is completely transformed by the strong force, has nourished the dry meridians. As we move forward, this dim space is gradually filled with the faint blue color. Jian Wushuang felt a little restless. At the same time, layers of dark blue light began to cling to the surrounding stone walls. Could this be the place where Zhenwu Yang hides his chance? He thought. There are nearly 400 Yanxian participants in this battle for Peach, but there is only one Xiantao, which cannot be divided equally. Therefore, Zanuyang distributes unknown geometric opportunities in this celestial realm for the Yanxian to find and understand. In a certain way, this is also a creation for Yanxian who can come to heaven to feast. Moving forward with curiosity, but not long afterwards, he reached the end of this hidden space. Looking into the eyes, only one side of the stone wall covered with fine grass. However, Jian Wushuang did not rush to leave. He still went forward, came to the stone wall, and reached out to get rid of the dense vine grass. The stone wall showed the true content, and a series of artificially carved ravines connected to each other and formed a complicated and obscure pattern. What kind of prohibition do these dry lines look like blocking the way forward? If it were earlier, Jian Wushuang might have tried to dismantle it with violence, but now he can't even manipulate the force, let alone use violence. In the dark, he always felt that behind the stone wall, nothing was hidden. Slightly silent for a moment, Jian Wushuang cast his gaze on the stone walls on both sides behind him. As soon as his thoughts moved, he turned and let a ray of blue light clinging to the stone wall into his hand. After a moment of hesitation, Jian Wushuang pressed the palm of the beam around the stone wall. In an instant, the magnificent flower blooms. Wisps of blue light spontaneously poured into the gully lines on the stone wall, quickly rushed to fill the lines. The whole stone wall began to escape from the strange huamang, filling the dim space. Buzz. A deep buzzing sounded. The prohibition on the stone wall quietly worked, and at the same time a strong glory lit up, causing Jian Wushuang to subconsciously cover his eyes. At the same time a mildewy smell, with a faint smell of decay, passed into his nose. After the strong light dissipated, Jian Wushuang gazed at the front. The stone wall has disappeared, and there is a small world behind him that comes into view. Those dark blue light beams did not disappear, but in the small world in front, freely soaring, Jian Wushuang stepped into it slowly, covered with a layer of dust on the blue stone floor. This small world seems to be a dojo that was created by a powerful person. A desolate breath that has settled over the years is coming. As soon as I stepped in, the long wind lifted. Immediately before he settled his mind, the hundreds of thousands of lines of huamang in this dojo seemed to be excited, and they all rushed to Jian Wushuang. Just like big rivers and rivers, all rushes poured out. Jian Wushuang didn't even have time to dodge. Then all huamang directly wrapped his whole person. Okay. An indescribable suffocation made him almost breathless, but then a tremendous force was born in his meridian. At the same time, the shackles of his state in his consciousness seemed to be loosened. Almost at the same time, the bowl-shaped bottle at the waist of Jian Wushuang trembles suddenly, and then a projectile-like thing directly squeezes the bottle stopper and flew out. Bones. The projectile-like thing was a broken stone bead, which was obtained by Jian Wushuang's beheading the giant sea sky chapter earlier in the sea. The original gray surface was quietly rotated at this moment, as if the heavens and the earth were hidden and the stars flowed. At the same time as the stone bead appeared, the blue Huameng beam that had originally wrapped around Jian Wushuang's body began to fall off, and then all rushed towards the stone bead. Jian Wushuang stood on the spot, breathing slightly and watching this scene of Xianqi. But within 10 breaths, the blue mansions flooding the entire space were all disappeared by the stone beads, falling into the dark all around. Only the stone beads exuding luster at that moment, slowly turning. It is like a blue planet with a huge and vast atmosphere. Immediately afterwards, tiny stars floated quietly around the stone beads, mysterious. The stars are connected by white silk thread, forming a tiny but vast galaxy. Jian Wushuang looked at the stone bead that had turned upside down in shock, and the magnificent galaxy reflected in his clear eyes. There seemed to be a peculiar energy in Mingming, pulling him close to the stone bead. Is there something hidden inside this stone bead? Jian Wushuang doubted, reached out his right hand and slowly clicked on the galaxy on the surface of the stone bead. Suddenly, a tiny star turned into a white man's body and poured into his body. OM! Like a long water ripple, the surface of the stone beads rippled. Jian Wushuang was startled, and then looked at the stone bead incredulously. Point the river. The star that penetrated into him carried a kind of unprecedented trend, and fed it back to Jian Wushuang. In his consciousness, that kind of energy is gestating. He tried again in the consciousness. With just one finger, a magnificent galaxy is constructed in the consciousness. Among the galaxies constructed, he became the only master. Chapter 47:39. But immediately after Jian Wushuang's mind, the constructed galaxy shattered again, as if nothing had happened. This seems to be tasteless, but it is indeed a tasteless feeling, and it seems that it has no other effect except the magnificence. Could it be that the feelings that can only be formed in divine consciousness are only triggering their own intracranial orgasm? Soon Jian Wushuang negated again this kind of feeling that can construct a galaxy. When it appeared in his mind, he reminded him of the original divine universe. In the divine power universe, the Supreme can construct a kingdom of God, which is equivalent to an extension of its own realm. In the God kingdom built by itself, it will greatly weaken the enemy's power. At present, the galaxy constructed in his mind seems to have the same effect as the construction of the kingdom of God. Since they are roughly the same, can we visualize the galaxies in our minds? Jian Wushuang thought so, and then he set out to try. Tap your fingers in the air, and you will find a star pattern, a mysterious mystery. But just as Jian Wushuang was ready to go further and realize this kind of realization, a sigh that seemed to be tortured to the extreme interrupted his thoughts. Jian Wushuang was suddenly vigilant, and the vigor that had just scattered outside his body was recovered, ready to respond to the situation at any time. With this deep sigh resounding, the original stone ball, which was still like a small planet, restored its gray appearance and rolled to the feet of Jian Wushuang. The atmosphere was extremely dead. His figure was low, and his palm was pressed against the handle of Tai Luo, looking at the place where the sound was coming. Being able to be in this space and make Jian Wushuang unaware. How terrible is this? Without rash action, he was thinking about how to escape. With that quiet sigh stopped, this plunged into a very dark space, suddenly brightened up like the sun shining like that, so that everything had nothing to hide. Jian Wushuang was shocked, because he only found out that he was sitting cross-legged in a straight position right in front of him. It was a tall and sturdy figure, even with his back to the sword Wushuang. It also showed a sense of oppressive oppression by Yuan Shi Yuji. Why? An extremely distressed voice sounded abruptly, and then under Jian Wushuang's gaze, the Yuanzhu Yuezi's stunning figure actually stretched out his palm and patted his head. Why can't I see? Why can't I see? There must be something wrong. Yes, it must be something wrong in my perception. In the voice of sorrow and thoughts, the photographic figure stood slowly, and the Chinese suit was windless and automatic. Then Jian Wushuang finally saw the face of this dignified figure. His extremely heroic cheeks may be slightly young because of being too young. His eyebrows are like distant mountains, and his eyes are like stars, just like the characters walking out of the painting. At such a short distance, he regarded the sword as unparalleled as nothing, completely immersed in his own perception. The terrible sense of pressure on the whole body surged around him, as if millions of peaks had been pressed. Jian Wushuang only felt that his chest was extremely tight, and the blood flow in the body accelerated. This terrible dynamism has exceeded his existing cognition, and even the breath of the three emperors and real shadows is difficult to resist. It's just that the dynamism of this state disappears with the eye-opening eyes. The dead gray and pain that could not be concealed in his eyes made Jian Wushuang feel that he seemed to be experiencing some kind of bottleneck and could not break through. Why, I have already taken that step. Why can't I realize the emperor's luck? The person was so stupid his eyes were blind, and he began to lose soul. Don't I be an emperor after all this journey? Jian Wushuang was somewhat unclear, so he slowly stood up and walked over in front of the photographic figure. Surprisingly, that person's physique did not look at Jian Wushuang, and it didn't help that he waved his palm. It's strange, he can't see me. Is he not a living person? Jian Wushuang secretly said, and then he extended his palm again, tentatively preparing to touch him. But at the next moment, the stunning figure suddenly raised his head, and his sharp, sword-like gaze aimed at Jian Wushuang. Who is it? Jian Wushuang stepped back a few steps. His heart almost stopped beating. However, he later discovered that the person was not looking at him, but that he had spared him to look at the unknown. Jian Wushuang looked back and found no other people. He began to understand something. He entered this space by mistake, and the scene that happened was most likely a video that had not been sealed for many years. Then the photographing figure seemed to be talking to someone, a flash of pain in his eyes. No, I can't make this decision. The person's body retreated, and the pain in his eyes began to hesitate. But as time went on, the pain and hesitation in his eyes gradually shook. This photographic figure seems to have met the conditions with something unknown. In the end, he said hard, yes. As these two words fell, the entire hidden space began to tremble, and the fine cracks directly covered the entire bluestone slab. The space seems to be collapsing. Jian Wushuang was too late to think about it, and hurriedly backed away, preparing to escape from this place. The tremors resounded, the hidden space began to fall apart, and countless rubble dropped. Fortunately, the channel can still persist without breaking. Jian Wushuang ran in steps, and when he was about to escape from this hidden space, he looked back. The image in the hidden space is dying, but at the time of dying, the photographing body image has been sublimated, and a unique luck has blessed it. Boom! The entire Shinfeng mountain collapsed completely, and even the hidden space was destroyed. Jian Wushuang stood on a mountain and looked at the broken Shinfeng, which was still raising dust, with a complex look. Everything I just experienced is like a dream. Even if it is only a few days, it makes him seem to travel to an unknown era. Who was left behind in the scene, just now, gently holding the palm of his hand? Jian Wushuang found out that he didn't know when he had returned to its peak state, and it seemed that the utmost filling power could break through at any time. The sky vault, which was still in fierce fighting, now showed a strange silence, but Jian Wushuang knew that this battle for the peach has not ended. He could feel that the guy who had attacked him still had his breath on the sky. Since you haven't died, you have to do something you should do, such as revenge. on the soles of the feet, Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared, and the entire shinfeng under his feet collapsed directly. Aren't you going to give up yet? Do you really want me to kill you here? Chapter 4740. The dark red sky has appeared, and there is a raging wind. There are very few Yenxian who can stand here. The slightly inferior young sun came and dragged the young sun out of the game at the last minute. At this moment, only less than 10 figures are still standing. The young man's face is somber, and his white-toothed suit has been broken, and his long black hair is broken, and the band is dancing with the wind. Standing on the opposite side of him was a little emperor with a mouthful of blood and withered breath to the extreme. His palm holding the soft sword was shaking, but he still looked at the young man with scorn and sarcasm in his eyes. Finally say it, give Xiantao to me, and then get out of the game. The sun's voice became colder, and the killing intentions in his eyes gradually disappeared. A little emperor, with a bright red color on his cheek, coughed out a ray of divine blood, and then said quietly, "You said, how many days have Xiantao been on this emperor? Should it be 6 days?" It's been 6 days since the sun corrected his cold face, and Xiantao disappeared. During these 6 days, he had several opportunities to kill the little emperor, but he didn't play the killer because of some concerns. This also caused time to pass rapidly. Once Xiantao stayed in the hands of a certain Yenxian for 7 days, the battle for the peach was declared over. And this is the last day. You really don't plan to hand it to me? The sun took a step forward, and horrified Yanli swept up. Xiao Daijin's thin figure seemed to fall at any time, but there was no fear in his eyes at all, and the meaning of sarcasm was more obvious. "Idiot, don't you really think Xiantao is in my hand?" The young man corrected his gaze, and was about to speak. A stone infused with Yen Li hit the back of his head without warning. "Fool, look here." A clear voice sounded, and looking around, a black-shirt ranger figure held Xiantao in his left hand, looking at him with a smile. The sun corrected his pupils and shrank. He clearly remembered his blow, and he had already beheaded. "Why didn't you die? If I'm dead, how can I take revenge by hand?" Xiantao was thrust into his arms, Jian Wushuang calmly said. At the next moment, he suddenly set off, carrying the endless momentum, and ran into the young man without fear. Looking at the re-entered figure, the little emperor spit out a deep breath and relaxed completely. One of the most magnificent Tianmen poles was pushed down, and the unparalleled surging power almost completely suppressed the sun at the moment of collision. At the same time, Jian Wushuang pulled out the Tai Luo Excalibur and slashed down with great force. A sword is worth 10,000 swords. The sword that has returned to the pinnacle is unparalleled. The sword style is wide open and wide, full of domineering sense of desperation. For a time, the oppressed sun is difficult to fight back. Young master is very stubborn. At the same time, he also understands why the young master Yu was difficult to beat before. This Yenxian is extraordinary. A star-shaped sword burst out in the stars, lakes, and seas, and the horrible sword swept up, letting the unprepared sun correct, and suffered a heavy loss. With a kick, Jian Wushuang backed away from the battle circle. The tooth-white kimono was completely broken, and the skin cut by thousands of sword intentions exuded Yinhongshan blood. The sun's anger was extremely extreme, but the seemingly horrible sword intention was at the end, but only torn his clothes, not even serious injuries, which is simply an insult to him. He couldn't stand it. Between the palms of his hands, a pale red picture scroll spread out. At the same time, a silky, misty, chaotic atmosphere emerged behind the sun's correction, in which unimaginable power surged. Jian Wushuang also took away the contempt. He could feel this kind of move, and had already surpassed the existing state. "Damn things, since you still come back to die, then I will fulfill you." The sun's uncontrollable rage broke out, and he stretched out his palms and snapped together. The silky misty chaos behind him vacated. Jian Wushuang tried to avoid it, but found that the pale red scroll that spread to his feet somehow seemed like a kind of prohibition, and he was firmly trapped in place. Two immortal fairy styles encircle Xiang Jianwushuang. He simply cannot survive. There was even a sneer on the face of Gongzi Dingnat Yinggu. The silky, misty, chaotic atmosphere. No accident swallowed the sword Wushuang. The Emperor Shao, who was watching from afar, was shocked in his heart, and he really understood the terrible sun's correction. If he does not have a fairy-style body, there is no possibility to escape from his hands. And even if Wushuang is even more powerful, I am afraid it will not escape. This guy can never die so easily. Xiao Dijuan shook his head and looked closely into the distance. There, it seemed as though the chaotic breath of the unknown monster was eating away. There was a flash of pleasure in Gong Zizheng's face, looking at someone who dared to rebel against him and died in front of him. There was nothing more pleasant than this. Looking at the squirming, chaotic breath, thinking that the time was almost running, he was ready to recall with a wave of his hand. However, at the next moment, an abrupt peak of the mountain peak suddenly burst into that chaotic atmosphere. At the same time, a vertical waterfall falls from the sky dome and falls completely. Another big day emerged out of thin air, glorious. Such strange weather actually dispelled the chaotic atmosphere in a moment. That's the most difficult fairy style. Young Master Zhenyuan opened his eyes and looked at this scene in disbelief. After the chaotic breath completely dissipated, the thin and firm figure appeared again. Sword Wushuang at the moment. His eyes reflected the boundless stars. In his eyebrows, a galaxy composed of 7 stars is moving slowly. Faced with the correction of the sun, he pointed out, the giant water roared by Yanli swept away directly. At the same time, long winds, mountains, rivers, big sun, and other natural scenes appeared one after another. The unimaginable landscape appeared on the stage at the moment, and all of them hit the sun. Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became clear. Okanshu, he slowly raised the corner of his mouth. The magnificent galaxy that was constructed in his mind earlier was visualized by him now. The so-called mountains and rivers are just a mountain river. What the heart thinks is self-made. All these wonders are what Jian Wushuang thought. Whatever I want, I use everything. At this moment, Jian Wushuang can use everything in this entire heaven. Two-finger halberd, the giant mountain shinfeng, which was originally pulled off by the sun's feather, now grew out of the clouds, facing the sun's correction. The boundless shinfeng cover pressed down. Reluctant to get rid of the giant water and endure the sun-drenched sun's correction, has been miserable. These methods turned out to be fairy style. Chapter 47-41. He did not think of it anyway. The guy, instead of not dying, manipulated the fairy style to return. A seemingly inconspicuous and impenetrable guy actually realized the fairy style, which made him not shocked. It should be understood that being able to comprehend the immortal style means that the realm of Yanxian is harmonious, and it touches a higher level. Understanding and making good use of it further illustrate its terrible point. Breaking through Yanxian will only be a matter of time. Since the ancient times, I do know how many top cultivations are difficult to enter the realm of Yanxian. Above Yanxian, such a state of delusion makes Yanxian desperate. Yanxian is a watershed, even if Shou Yuan is endless, but he can't feel the mysterious luck, he can only despair. At the same time, even if it is an extraordinary fairy, there are very few who are able to die. The state cannot be broken through to another level, and the endless Shou Yuan is like a trap and a cage to them. Yanxian, who has not broken the shackles, may die in a fierce battle with the turmoil of one side of the sky, or he may self-cut off the source of the fairy, and will not even enter the cycle. This is a path of cultivation, without retreat. The vast silence is far more than the brutal killing. The first step in breaking through shackles is to realize the fairy style. Right now, this ensuing spectacle is not a fairy style, and what would it be? The little emperor was already shocked. When he saw the figure, like the emperor of a party, he ordered the scene of the river, the scene he was most unwilling to see in his heart appeared. So, is this his real strength? Enough! You stop me! The sun's eyes turned red. He waved his palms and suddenly torn the mountain that suppressed him. The series of fierce battles have made the sun Zijing tired, especially in the previous fairy style of the Little Emperor, which has consumed more than half of his physical strength. The several Yenxian present were all retreating consciously for fear of becoming a cannon fodder. Sword Wushuang, dotted with Tsangu galaxies, looked at him indifferently. The young man corrected, gasping slightly, with a little hysterical, Do you think that by just hitting the fairy style, do you want to deal with me? Prepare to regret it. The pale red scroll that stretched for thousands of miles became fuller, and the young man stood in the center of the scroll, slowly condensing his vigorous strength. Immediately afterwards, the picture scroll twisted up and formed a real shadow. Every real shadow is a sun's correction. The light red Real shadow condenses like substance, all encircling the sword Wushuang. You guys, you never see the coffin without tears. Since you have to fight to the end, then I have to send you to see the coffin. The young man smiled strangely, and after whispering a word of extinction, he was swallowed by the darkness within the scroll space of the instant. Outsiders could not detect the scene at all. Nearly 100 real shadows in the entire scroll space moved at this moment, carrying vigorous vigor and rushing forward. And Jian Wushuang noticed the change as soon as possible. He suddenly waved his hand, and a round of Yao Yao hung up, shining 100 miles. The indescribable beam of light barely ripped open the darkness, and those real shadows running forward and back struck the sun's beam, and turned into a pile of mud directly on the ground. But Jian Wushuang immediately felt something was wrong. The real shadows that had turned into mud were tumbling, but in an instant they turned into thousands of chains, trapping him from bottom to top. In the next moment, this strangely dark space actually gave birth to countless strange eyes. Each pair of eyes is joking, cruel, or indifferent, as if one side is an endless abyss, which makes one sink into it at a glance. Jian Wushuang was trapped by chains, unable to move at all, and could only watch the eyes above his head madly eating the strength in his body. Outside this extremely dark space, the corner of Mourinho's mouth reveals a meaningless smile. If it's not in heaven, I will treat you well. Then he turned slowly and faced the lonely little emperor quietly and said, Your reliance is already one step ahead. You haven't quit yet. Are you going to let me throw you out? Zai Odigen looked at Gongzizem coldly. With his own intuition, he knew that Jian Wushuang couldn't get out so easily. Sure enough, when the smile on the sun's corrective face had not receded, the extremely dark space behind him stretched out. A wailing cry wailed in the wind, and a huge amount of mixed black bursted out. The shape of a hand King Shenfeng is coming. Jian Wushuang was indifferent in his eyes, and then faced with the younger son. He threw the Shenfeng in his hand. Under such an unexpected situation, Gongzizing didn't even make a sound, and was overwhelmed by Shenfeng who came from the face. The Shenfeng, which was 1,000 feet tall, rose in the face of the storm and turned into a mountain of 1,000 feet tall. With an irresistible power, he sealed his entire body in the roots of the mountain. The earth collapsed, the Tianhe River was against the current, and the vision was engulfed. Adhering to the principle of taking advantage of his illness and killing his life, Jian Wushuang condensed his strength on the soles of his feet, and then stomped on the top of Shinshan Mountain with a shocking and powerful foot. Boom! Thousands of gods can't stand this foot, and a deep gully has cracked. Julie went straight to the surface, and the young man who was under the pressure of the root of the mountain corrected, and he was so angry that when he was ready to rush out, he almost kicked the fairy source. As soon as his eyes were dark, the blood of Yin Hong spewed out of his nose. Just as Jian Wushuang was ready to take a break and took off his son's life, there was a loud sound from the morning and evening drums. The time has come, please stop here and rush to heaven. In a black robe, the extremely mysterious Yubo appeared in the sky, and some murky eyes looked at each Yenxian, who only survived to the end. A flash of Sun Han flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. When a Khonshu, Kam was about to release the final thunder blow, it was found that the air seemed to stagnate, which actually restrained Yanli. He seemed to feel something and turned to look at Yu Bo, who appeared in the heaven. Facing each other, Yu Bo's turbid eyes had a subtle fluctuation, and then he turned his head and waved his sleeves, and then sent the son who was sealed under the Shenfeng back to heaven. Please rush to heaven immediately. After saying this last sentence, the whole heaven was completely silent. The remaining Yenxian glanced at each other, and then all fled here quickly, rushing to heaven. Slowly spit out a breath, Jian Wushuang finally relaxed. This half-year-long battle for the peach, so far, ended with the victory of Jian Wushuang, Zhenfeng Gongzi, holding Xiantao. Chapter 47-42. No one of Tianting Yenxian can guess this will be the end. Jian Wushuang is like a shock breaking into every line of sight. It's unbelievable. For the first time, Xiantao in the feast was taken away by Yenxian except the 7 emperors. Moreover, Jian Wushuang is not the little emperor's companion, so this fairy peach in his hand is completely owned by him. Taking out the fairy peach containing the shackles of numerology from his arms, he didn't even miss it, like an ordinary fruit. Hey, then! Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and threw the fairy peach to the little emperor. A stream of light flashed across the sky and then fell into his hands. Looking at the fruit with diffusive power in his hand, Xiaodaijin raised his brows slightly. He just had to bite a bit, and the chance in Xiantao would rush into the body to help him break through. But at the next moment, the little emperor's palm opened and closed, and the fairy peach was divided into 2 halves. Hey, then! He said the same, throwing half of Xiantao to Jian Wushuang. The two smiled at each other, and then bit the fairy in their respective hands. Fairy rhyme is vast, smoke is flowing. In the heavens where singing and dancing are still flat, the silence is extremely extreme at the moment. Emperor Zhenwiang, who was sitting on the throne, suppressed the anger in a pair of captivating eyes. Under his next head, all the emperors were silent and dejected. Only then did the son, who was awake from the coma, correct his eyes, and his eyes were full of coldness. The 2 figures walked slowly into the heavenly palace. The little emperor, who has changed into a luxurious kimono with a smile on his face, does not care that all his eyes gather. The sword has no double-face color and is indifferent, slowly pacing forward, as if there are mountains and rivers in his chest, vaguely revealing the breadth of dignity. Faced with this kind of scene, he did not panic, and even wanted to say a small scene in his heart. Before he entered Daanhuan, standing at the pinnacle of the divine universe and controlling the avenue, let him raise his hand and throw it in his feet with an indelible camera. Even Zhen Wuyang, who was sitting on the throne, had a weird feeling of sitting upright when facing this young man. But this feeling was quickly erased from his mind, and Zhen Wuyang snapped the case. Suddenly, black smoke. All Yenxian shivered. They naturally understood why the emperor was so angry. In the battles for winning the peach several times, Almost all of the taboos that cannot be committed have been committed this time. They formed a camp with each other and became a weapon in the hands of various emperors and the eagle dog under the seat. However, the most important point is that the iron rule that the heaven cannot be stained with blood is broken by the little emperor and the weird guy beside him. So at this moment, the Yensian who participated in the battle for the peach all looked at the two of them meaningfully. I haven't knelt down for me, something that doesn't work. Shen Wuyang screamed again, almost breaking the case in front of him with his palm. However, the two figures were motionless. Jian Wushuang only felt inexplicable. His eyes looked aside. The little emperor said a little in the corner of his mouth and said softly, "There is always a reason why the emperor wants me to kneel. After all, I am an ineffective thing and can't stand in front of them." After he finished speaking, he looked at the other 6 emperors, and his sarcasm was beyond words. The Emperor Zhenyang was very angry, and it was another case. "I am your father. Is this reason enough?" "Enough." The little emperor knelt on one knee. "Enough." Seeing Emperor Xiao kneel, Zhan Wuyang's complexion slightly eased, and a pair of photographing eyes scanned the crowd. "It's really black smoke, a good game. This is the end of the point, but even dozens of Yensian have fallen. Do you have the right to ignore this iron law?" The resentful young son stood up at the moment. "Back to the emperor. All the deceased Yensian were all done by Gongzi Yan and the fellow around him. We have not missed. Do you think your mistakes are lighter than them?" Zhan Wuyang looked at him. "Shenfeng, who supported the heavens, was destroyed by your own hands and tried to break the rules. Is it you who wants to use this to open the Xiantao ban?" Gong Ziyu cold sweat instantly fell. He did not expect that his meaningless actions will be found the real intention. "Emperor, listen to me." "No need to explain. I will consciously go to heaven realm to get 100 sticks, but 1 stick will not work." Zhen Wuyang said angrily. Master Ziyu's face was pale. All the 100 sticks in this world were all held by the masters. Each stick was enough to make ordinary Yensian suffer. If these 100 sticks go down, I am afraid that it will be difficult for him to get out of bed for 100 years. Follow the order. Young Master Yu gritted his teeth and returned to his original seat, and he even almost laughed out loud with his unfamiliar young master. "Emo," Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice, "this time of the Xiantao battle, your performances have disappointed me. Everyone will consciously go to the Celestial Leadership 50 in the future to introspect." All Yensian, faced with a bitter face, did not get much benefit from participating in the Feast of the Heavenly Court and ended up being hit by 50 sticks. But no one dared to refute. All bowed, complied. At this moment, Xiaodaijin coughed up artificially, and there was a hint of red on his pale cheeks. "Emperor, the sun is weak, so I can't lead the club." Emperor Zhenyang heard the words, nodded, and flicked his hand. The sun is exempted from punishment, and the rest of the people are still punished as usual. As soon as this remark came out, all the other 6 emperors were angered, glaring at the little emperor, but they dared not say anything, for fear of getting more sticks. It seemed to be afraid that Zhong Yensian felt that he was partial, and Zhen Wuyang then said, "But Master Yang's behavior is bad, so fine him to listen to the wind table wall for 10 years. It's okay not to say this. As soon as I said it, all Yangxian's eyes almost burned the little emperor to ashes. It is said to listen to the punishment on the wall of the wind table. Isn't it more appropriate to go on holiday? The entire listening typhoon contains thousands of peach forests, immense bamboo fairy tales, among which there are fairy tales of heavenly courts, and from time to time fairy celestial dancers are dancing. In this environment, can you think about it? What are you waiting for before punishing? Isn't it enough?" Zhen Wuyang Wei's voice resounded. All Yensian heard the words and hurriedly rushed out of heaven, fearing to take the next step. take a deep look at the little emperor, a gloomy and violent flash flashed in the eyes of the sun, and then walked out of the heavenly court. For a time, there were only more than 100 figures left in this vast heaven. Every veteran looks at Xiao and Jian Wuxuang with great interest, and seems to have great interest in their combination. With supreme coercive eyes, he looked at Jian Wuxuang. Shen Wuyang said quietly, "Why don't you go to the penalty?"